David here.
Judy here.
Guzekowski. Crowley.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
Commissioner Carrillo is excused. Item 2 is minutes of the July 12, 2016 meeting. If no questions, we need a motion.
Hickman makes a motion that we approve the minutes of the July 12, 2016 meeting.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye. David Chai.
Judy, aye.
I was not there. Crowley.
Seifert aye.
Chandler, aye.
Right. Ayes across the board except for abstain from Alderman Guzekowski. Item 3 is significant common council actions.
Common Council approved the following: an ordinance to rezone the properties at 7008 and 7018 South 27th Street from B2 Community Business and B3 Office and Professional Business to B4 Highway Business, excluding the Regional Retail Overlay District, and 2500 West Rawson Avenue from single-family residential and two-family residential to B4 Highway Business, excluding the Regional Retail Overlay District, all with a conditional use for automobile sales and service and a car wash. Also approved an ordinance for the rezoning of properties at 6304 and 6340 South Howell, 137, 147, and 209 East College Avenue, all from B4 Highway Business to M1 Manufacturing, with a conditional use for a self-storage facility without outdoor storage or display. An ordinance amending the conditions and restrictions in Ordinance 2550 for Cave Enterprises LLC, a conditional use permit for a restaurant with drive-through facility at 8081 South Howell. An ordinance approving a conditional use permit for the property at 7801 South Pennsylvania Avenue for a community-based residential facility with a capacity of at least 9 but no more than 20 persons. Resolution creating, describing, and making certain findings and approving the project plan for tax incremental district number 12. A resolution approving a certified survey map for the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue. A resolution approving a certified survey map for the properties at 9750R, 9770, 9856, and 9860 South 20th Street. And a resolution approving an exchange agreement between the City of Oak Creek and Fifth Property LLC. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Moving on to new business. Let's see if we can get through the meeting without anybody yelling at each other. Item 4A is a plan review of site, building, and landscaping plan submitted by Pete Caruso, Black Bear Bottling Company, for an addition to the existing building and properties as listed on South 20th Street. Tax key numbers also as listed.
If I could get the information to project onto the screen, please. While we're waiting for images to be projected, this is a request for an addition to the existing building at the property 9770 South 20th Street for Black Bear Bottling. Since the Plan Commission packets were sent out, there was an update to the existing square footage of the building. It is actually 48,253 square feet. The proposal is for a 65,000 square foot single-story addition on the south of the existing building, with an option for a future 39,000 square foot addition. There would be 4 new loading docks on the west, and all setbacks to the property lines and rights-of-way are met in the proposal. As mentioned in the report, there would be a requirement for 20th Street to be extended to serve the addition. Wetland delineation would be needed prior to that addition being constructed.
Need a few minutes?
I just need 1 second, excuse me.
Got it?
Got it. Apologies.
No problem.
The properties in question are highlighted in red on the screen. Again, this is for Black Bear Bottling. The proposed addition is on the screen. As you can see, the 20th Street extension is shown on the south part, the bottom part of the screen, that's actually the west. Again, a wetland delineation would be needed. There was one conducted, but it stopped at the property line. In order to extend the 20th Street portion there to serve the addition, we do need to have a wetland delineation conducted so that we can go through the proper permitting with DNR if necessary. Also, the temporary cul-de-sac would need to be at least 55 feet in radius with curbs, and it needs to be designed to remain on the applicant's property. As shown, it actually accidentally crosses onto someone else's property. The applicant and their consultant are aware of that and will work with the engineering department to address those concerns. Parking is currently shown on the north and on the northeast here. Currently, there would be 10 employees between the office and warehouse after the addition. The total required parking stalls would be 33. I believe your report says 32, but that's due to the change in the square footage that was calculated. Currently, there are 33 parking stalls. Future parking is shown for 16 additional stalls on that northeast portion where the parking exists, and that would accommodate the future addition should that go through. And this is showing the close-up of the addition with the wetlands, the proposed detention pond, and the extension of 20th Street. These are the elevations that are proposed for the addition. Building materials include pre-finished corrugated metal panels on a 4-foot-tall split-face CMU wall base on the west, and that would match the existing building. There's also proposed a pre-finished metal roof to match the existing building. As you're aware, corrugated metal panels does require a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission. This will match the existing building except for a pattern that is introduced on the west, and that's to break up that wall facade a bit because it does extend more than 100 feet. There's also a canopy proposed over the 4 loading docks that are on the west for the addition. Lighting is limited to building lighting as wall packs on the walls. The existing dumpster enclosure will remain where it is, as is. Stormwater is currently being coordinated with the engineering department. Water and sewer connections should also be coordinated with the water and sewer utility. There was a comment from the utility that the building cannot cross over the lines there. Landscape plans were provided, but there is a recommendation for a couple of additional plantings to be placed along the building itself outside the wetland area. The staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Peter Caruso, Black Bear Bottling, for the properties at 9750R, 9770, 9856, and 9860 South 20th Street, subject to conditions 1 through 6. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Open it up to the commission for comments. Commissioner Chandler.
Is the applicant,
Applicant's representative, the architect, Eric Madison, is here.
I just had some questions in regards to this temporary road. Can you provide a little more information?
Name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Eric Madison. I'm the architect from Madison Maher Architects, 600 West Virginia Street, Milwaukee.
Questions?
Yes, can you provide more information about the temporary road, its purpose, how long it will be there?
Yeah, the road, my understanding is it needs to be built to city standards, so it will be as a permanent road. The applicant, Pete Caruso, wanted to take that road over as a private road, and the city wants to keep it. So we're extending it to the south property line of Black Bear to city standards with curb and gutter and full design.
Oh, so this is not temporary. This is a permanent road.
My understanding, the cul-de-sac design was sort of that P shape, and that's called a temporary cul-de-sac. We don't know what temporary means, but since that was laid out, now they want to have us do a full 55-foot diameter cul-de-sac.
Carrie, can you speak to that?
Actually, I'll defer to Commissioner Johnston.
Oh, okay. All right. Mr. Johnson?
The temporary 37.5-foot radius is for a residential development. A semi can't make that turn, so we did the same thing on, Ridgeview, when Yakich expanded their road down. Their cul-de-sac is a 55-foot radius cul-de-sac, so then a semi can make a turn without driving off the edge of it.
Okay, so then the road goes away or the cul-de-sac goes away?
The cul-de-sac will go away once the road is extended further south.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Dickman and then Commissioner Johnson, then
Just kind of a general question. This is a very, very large addition compared to the existing building. And then you're looking at the future addition. Any ideas? Are you waiting to see that this pays off first before you ever make the decisions you think on the future?
I think right now, my understanding is an economic decision, just with the cost of putting that, the 65,000 square foot addition on. They want to see where their business goes. They believe it's going to expand to the full 104,000 square foot building in the future.
Commissioner Johnston?
I actually have a question for Assistant Chief Kresick about the grass pavers. And this is one of the issues we still have to work out yet for stormwater. They're a grass paver, they're still considered runoff. That's in the wetland buffer area, so that's draining to the wetlands. How they're going to figure that all out. We still have a lot of questions on these plans. Do you have any concerns with the pavers?
Mike Kresick, Fire Department, and I'll kind of reference back to the previous meeting with the CBRF facility on Mayhew. The access road, we had worked out a contingency using an alternative type of paver, actually a natural grass product on top of a firm base. It was my understanding in speaking with the architect regarding this project that there were some concerns about the amount of, from the fire department's perspective, green space versus paved material. As an alternative, and what we've allowed in some previous projects are alternative methods to provide for an access road, because certainly the size of the structure requires 360 access around it. We have alternative methods to achieve that outside of strict paving, and the grass-type pavers are one of those that we have utilized in the past. Certainly, we are open and understand the requirements surrounding that, so we would entertain any discussion related to that.
And does that need to be plowed and maintained in the winter?
Yes.
Applicant understands that? Okay. That's your only question?
Yes.
Alderman Bekavich?
Mike, you may as well just stick around. The one was answered, Brian got to that one. As far as the road goes, the extension of 20th, do you need extra hydrant there? I'm sure the building's fully sprinkled and you're working on that, blah, blah, blah. But what about the hydrant on 20th? Do we have to extend that out?
Potentially, yes. We will work with the water utility. The water utility has their own coverage requirements as identified by the DNR, I believe. The fire department also has hydrant coverage requirements based on state and national codes surrounding that structure. So in addition to the public water supply and the public hydrants, there, I'm guessing, would be several private hydrants also added to that site.
Commissioner Seibert?
Yeah, I just have a question on the dumpster. It's going to stay the same, it will be enclosed.
Yes, there's an existing masonry dumpster enclosure that is on the previous edition, and it'll be on the north side. Actually, it's right here, if you can see my cursor moving.
Okay. That will be enclosed.
It already is enclosed.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Adequate dumpster space for the addition as well?
There's no proposal to add another one, so my guess is, yes, they feel it's appropriate.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Motion on 4A.
Okay, which will make a motion that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans submitted by Peter Caruso, Black Bear Bottling for the properties at 9750R 9770, 9856, 9860 South 20th Street with the following conditions. Number one, that all revised plans, site, building, landscape, lighting, detail, etc. are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. Two, that all mechanical equipment and transformers, whether ground, building, or rooftop, are screened from view. Three, that all building and fire codes are met. Four, that the wetland delineation, information, stormwater, grading, and road extension plans are coordinated with and submitted for final approval to the engineering department prior to the issuance of permits. Five, that the final lighting plans indicating luminaire type, pole type, color, and height are submitted for final approval by a resident expert electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits.
I'll second.
Oh, one more. And six, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility.
Oh, he seconds.
Charles seconds, roll call.
Slow down.
Dick and I.
Johnston, aye.
Bugavich, aye.
Judy, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Krill, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Pass on the good news to Pete. Thank you. All right, next three are Blair's. So item 4B is a plan review of site building, landscaping, and lighting plan submitted by Blair Williams Wired Properties for a multi-tenant building on the property at 7940 South 6th Street, tax key number 813-9054. Carrie.
The application is for a proposed multi-tenant building on the property that is highlighted in red. This is part of Drexeltown Square. On the screen is a site plan showing the entire site. Now, this actually is showing two parcels. The first that we're going to be talking about is the west, which is for the B5 building. Next on the agenda is the B1 building, which is shown on the east. This is located in the mixed-use sub-district of Drexeltown Square. The proposal is for a one-story multi-tenant building on the northwest corner, which is parallel to Drexel Avenue. The original plan in the DTSMU PDD called for a B4 building, which would have been located in the southern part of this parcel. However, that plan has been replaced such that we have additional parking. There are three driveways that are providing access to this site. One is directly off of 6th Street, which is accessed off of Drexel Avenue. The other is on the southern part, which is accessed through that private alley or access drive in between this parcel and the parcel for the other Main Street buildings to the south. And then also a drive that is off of Main Street through that private development, that private access road for the B1 buildings. Approximate parking supply and demand requirements for retail and commercial office has been identified in the DTSMU PDD as 3.5 to 5 parking spaces per 1,000 gross square feet. For this particular building, that would equate to about 28 to 40 parking stalls. Submitted info from the applicant indicates that an anticipated 20 employees would be on site at any given time. Just for clarification, the size of the building is about 7,930 square feet. Again, this has shared parking with the proposed B1 buildings. With that in mind, a total of about 88 to 128 parking stalls would be required for all of the proposed square footage on these two properties. The total shown is 127. Pedestrian connections for this site include connections to the public sidewalk on 6th Street from the southwest corner of the building. See it better in the next set of plans. These are the landscape plans, but you can see there's a bit of a walkway here, and that'll connect to the public infrastructure that goes along 6th Street and up to Drexel Avenue. The recommendation from staff, though, is that we incorporate some bike racks in here to enhance the pedestrian and multimodal connections within Drexeltown Square. There is also a proposal for a remote ATM kiosk on the southern side of this lot. Right now, the request is for the location only. There would be additional details regarding the design of the kiosk at a later date. This site also includes an access lane to a drive-up window. The drive is through the parking lot on the north side of the building, around the west side and back through the parking lot. This is to serve the west tenant. Per the DTS MUPDD, however, drive-through facilities are restricted to the perimeter commercial, large format retail, and buildings B1, B2, C1, and C2 in the mixed-use subdistrict. While this is not a traditional drive-through because it is a single lane to a drive window for a non-restaurant tenant at this point, no distinction is made in the DTS MUPDD for restaurants versus any other use. Further, drive-up windows and lanes are specifically mentioned for buildings B1, B2, C1, and C2. Drive-through was never included as an allowed use in the text or Table 1 for the B5 building, which we are discussing. Should the Plan Commission, however, determine that a drive-up window with access lane or drive-through facility is appropriate for the B5 building, an amendment to the DTS MUPDD will be required. However, if the Plan Commission does not support a drive-up window with an access lane or drive-through facility in this location, the building plans may be approved with a condition that explicitly excludes that drive-through proposal. Moving on to service areas, however, for the building, deliveries will probably be made through the south doors as the northern doors are only accessed through the sidewalk that's provided around the building, and since there is an access drive there, it's unlikely that any deliveries will occur in that location. There is a dumpster enclosure that is between the two, the B5 and B1 buildings. There's two actually right here. While the plans indicate that this will be masonry with metal gates, we do need details, including dimensions, to be submitted with the final plans. Signage locations have been identified generally for the building and a maximum size for the west tenant. There will be detailed sign plans to be submitted for Plan Commission review at a later date. We have also received lighting plans that show the cyclone fixtures to be used in the parking lot. There is some question as to whether or not this should change to the Guardco fixtures. On your screen currently are the landscape plans for the site. Landscaping is provided along the street frontages, the corners of the building, and within the parking lot. They are generally in conformance with requirements, however, minor revisions may be required. A condition for approval has been included for landscaping plans to be approved by the Director of Community Development unless otherwise directed by the Plan Commission. These are the exterior elevations. I'm going to go over elevation by elevation. Starting with the north, this is a slight change from what was included in your packets. The west tenant glazing has been changed slightly. That material has actually increased the glazing on the west side of that tenant space. White brick cladding is proposed on the north elevation along with a stainless steel panel system above and set behind the brick level, which creates a raised roof element on the northeast tenant space and distinguishing the northwest tenant space. There are 5 aluminum storefronts with a combination of spandrel and clear glazing proposed, wood full-light doors, and concrete sill for the windows. There's also corrugated metal cladding accents on 4 of the storefronts. Glazing on this elevation is shown at 20%. The east, which is on the bottom of this sheet, includes stainless steel panel system, white brick cladding, the aluminum storefront with clear glazing, wood full-light door, and concrete sill, corrugated metal cladding accents above the storefront, and glazing on this elevation is at 31%. On the south, again, the white brick cladding, stainless steel panel system, storefronts with clear glazing, the same doors and concrete sills for the tenant spaces. Fabric awnings are proposed over each of the tenant entry facades, and also a hollow metal door for access for the landlord. Glazing on this elevation is at 37%. On the west elevation, the same brick cladding. There's also a tenant drive-up window and canopy on this elevation. Stainless steel panel system as on the other elevations. Aluminum storefront, metal cladding, the same kind of materials that are used on the other elevations. Glazing on this elevation has been increased to 20%. There were also references on the elevations for the building materials as or similar. Any material details for similar materials that might be used should be provided to the Plan Commission for the Plan Commission's approval. Also, utility brick is not allowed per the PUD and must be changed to a finished grade face brick of 4 inches minimum. All spandrel panels must be specified on the plans if there's to be any kind of variation between spandrel and clear glazing. That needs to be very clear on the elevations. The use of corrugated metal panels and also a metal panel system requires a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission. Metal panels are only allowed as a secondary material in the PUD. Rooftop mechanicals are proposed to be screened via the parapets, and all utilities, whether they are ground, building, or rooftop, must be screened. And the next series of images that appear on your screen are different elevations, different renderings of the elevations. This is on the southeast corner. This is looking west. This is the west tenant. Also the west tenant is looking east from the corner of Drexel and 6th. And this is the north facade. Staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Blair Williams Wired Properties for the property located at 7940 South 6th Street, subject to conditions 1 through 11 and an additional condition regarding the drive-through facility per the Plan Commission's discussion. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Applicant is here. Everything to say before we question you?
Can I ask a strange favor? Later, we're going to be talking about building C1. Could you find this image and put it on the screen for me? Blair Williams, 2022 East North Avenue, Suite 300, Milwaukee. It's nice to see you again. I feel like I was just here. We're very excited today. Not necessarily by the conditions associated with recommended approval, but certainly to present what may be amongst our last presentations to the Commission for our developments at Drexel Town Square. It's the one that shows kind of the context of everything. This process started about 4 years ago when I first got involved. I think it's almost 4.5 years ago now. And we went through a tremendous process, and the team was dynamic and large in arriving at what was then a conceptual site plan and now is seeing fruition out here on Drexel and Howell. And I think that process is important, as in a little bit of history could be helpful as we go through this decision process. There were a variety of things that drove how we arrived at the site plan, and we've got a full team of folks here that can share the history if we need. We've got Matt Rinka from Rinka Chung and Jerry Franke and Nate Franke from Wispark and Zilber, and it was an exhaustive process. But what we tried to do was come up with a plan and with anticipated forms and buildings that we thought would establish a baseline and a benchmark whereby developers like Wired Properties or like Barrett Lowe Visionary could come in and then execute specific developments that met that vision. There's some language in the DTSM UPDD which I think is really important, and it has to do not only with the nature of the proposals themselves, but which proposals were important and what those certain proposals needed. And there's language talking about first generation proposals. And these are the proposals for buildings that come forth the first time that these buildings are being proposed on the site. One of the sentences is that these design concepts have been substantially reviewed and presented to the general public as part of the overall DTS process. We think that's important. People have seen the ideas presented in this plan before, and they've adopted it in their minds as what they expect to see. These private development proposals also represent higher financial risks because they are part of the initial investment, which carries greater uncertainty and unforeseen difficulties with implementation. Given these circumstances, the review of first-generation development should be granted far more flexibility in the approval process. It's part of the underlying vision of how we got to where we are. And one of the things that it goes on to say is to allow for a reasonable degree of flexibility in site and building design, staff should make an official determination if a proposal demonstrates substantial compliance with the general development plan or first-generation proposals. So as we go through this, and the reason I shifted the picture from an image from this building to one of a couple buildings down the road and down the line here, is because this starts to give some context. And I think it's important to understand why we're making some of the decisions we're making, and our design team is taking cues from a broader fabric than simply solving the problems associated with an individual building. So Main Street is important, and I think every time I've stood up, I've exalted the importance of the pedestrian, and I've talked about how important the environment is. And what we have right now on Main Street as you walk out the door and look to the north is two buildings that have come out of the ground with an established kind of design sense. And they match each other in important ways, but they also stand apart from each other. The use of color and materials is intended to be sensitive, and we're trying to create an environment that is consistent for the pedestrian. So when folks come here, they know where they are. They've arrived at a place. This image starts to show how the C1 building, which we'll talk about shortly, and then the B1 buildings interact with those other buildings on Main Street. And the context I wanted to provide is to show how these materials relate to each other. We have a substantial investment now, as do you, in Main Street. And it is in our best interest to continue to protect that investment as fiercely as we possibly can. So I first want to suggest that what we're proposing today is intended to protect all of our mutual investment in what we've already accomplished in Main Street and where we think it can go. Now, we also know that we should be thinking about how this plan has been presented in the past. I'm going to hold this up. Unfortunately, the folks listening won't be able to see it. This is a first-generation proposal for Drexel Town Square. And I'm going to point to the circled building here, bringing us back towards our B5 building. The building on this plan looks almost identical to what we're proposing today. It's a rectangular building with a drive-through that wraps, a drive lane that wraps down Drexel and then wraps around the property. It's what we kind of originally contemplated as one of the potential outcomes when we were working through the PDD in the first place. And then the drive-through itself, there's actually language in the PDD that talks about whether drive-throughs should be considered. And it says that the northern edge of the mixed-use subdistrict in Block B and Block C and the library book drop-off, drive-throughs should be located. It talks about all of these things. Drive-throughs in and of themselves aren't prescribed against in the PDD. They're contemplated in the PDD. Indeed, Chick-fil-A, and we know that they've happened. But what we do know is that the fact that there's a drive-through isn't fundamentally at its core running contrary to what is important about the outcome here. What we believe matters, and I've talked a lot about this in the past, is we're trying to curate a mixed-use community. We want the right kinds of uses in the right places. We're trying to bring people at different times of day with different intent here as often as we possibly can. That repetitive business and that repetitive trip generation is what creates vitality in mixed-use environments. So I think my message today is one on materials. Know that we've contemplated greater context. A building in and of itself is a fine way to look at it, but I brought this image up because we think it's so important to remember what it is that we're looking at everywhere. And in terms of the other conditions, we're certainly comfortable with the notion that we need to bring final materials to staff. We'd prefer to bring it to staff and allow them to determine whether we've complied with the or similar requirements. We would like to be in the ground this fall. We'd like to be delivering these buildings to retailers for their improvements in first quarter or end of first quarter. And we'd like to have these buildings open for business with the first farmers market in the spring so that we can have these buildings delivered and finish Main Street the way that we set out to when we started construction a year ago. So now I'll take all of your questions and hopefully we can do it comfortably.
So your understanding of the early language was that outlying building did allow for a...
Yeah, I mean, the drawing in this, and I'll pass this for you to look at, this is a first-generation development proposal revised, and this was something that went through the West Park, Zilber city process as we were going through all of this, and I'll hand this and you can pass it down the line.
And while we're looking at that, so Carrie or Pete, is your understanding that, is there any distinction between if the commission was so inclined to grant this, piece on the drive-through or drive-up, whatever you want to call it. Is there any way to restrict it to a non-restaurant use?
Restaurant for a drive-through is not distinguished in either way, but a restaurant with a drive-through facility is listed as a conditional use in the mixed-use district. However, the text portion of the DTS MUPDD restricts drive-throughs in Block B to buildings B1 and B2. So if we are going to allow a drive-through for the B5 building, we do need to have an amendment to the PUD to allow that. What I can say is that the original approval in 2013 with the PUD did not show on the original map a building with a drive-through facility located. Staff is making absolutely no opinion or recommendation as to the appropriateness of a drive-through. Staff is simply bringing to the attention that this is not allowed per the text in the PUD, and therefore an amendment would be a requirement if the Plan Commission wants to move forward with a drive-through facility in this location.
So B1 does have a drive-through allowance.
Buildings B1 and B2 are specified
do.
as having allowances for a drive-through facility.
You have something to add?
No, please, Jerry.
A couple things. Gerald Frankie, West Park, 301 West Wisconsin Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. First of all, I think it's important to distinguish between drive-through and drive-up. This is clearly a drive-up window. We had the conversation back when we did the Chick-fil-A, and I said the only other drive-through that would occur would be on this property when we were questioning about other restaurants going forward. At that point, we thought it was going to be for a coffee vendor. I can tell you a coffee vendor has a lot more traffic than a bank or financial institution. We feel that it's important that we get these buildings underway, not only for the activity that they generate, but also for the additional parking that they create. Parking is readily becoming a concern for users such as Pizza Man, Bel Air Cantina, others. We need to get this component done on the development. So I would respectfully request that we think that the plan that Blair has come up with, a seasoned professional real estate developer, is more based in reality than that which is generated by a team on a conceptual basis led by a university professor. This is reality that you're seeing tonight, and we really think that it makes sense the way Blair has designed it.
Questions? Alderman Bekavich.
I guess I'll go first, and I'll start with the drive-through. Again, when we did that first generation plan, we had no idea of how this was going to play out, how it was going to lay out. I think Mr. Williams made some very valid points. Obviously, as you look at it now, a drive-through would never work in building 1 and 2, the way things have progressed and laid out. So I for one, was probably kind of shocked at the Chick-fil-A when it came through, and we danced all around, and thing went through, and it's working fine. Again, that's a very heavily traveled one. I would support this the way it lines up with the building. I think it actually fits the landscape of it. So I myself would support an amendment. Obviously, Carrie wants to chime in and correct me. Go ahead.
No correction. I will wait until you're finished.
Oh, okay. So given that, I would support that drive-through on the B5 building. My second question is, you have the mechanicals have to come up somewhere, the electrical, the gas, and the water. Are they coming up into a mechanical room with like a 600 amp service and a fire riser within that door for the tenant spaces, so we don't have to worry about screening on the outside? Because the way your building's set up, there's really no backside to it to hide.
Yeah, and I can defer to the design team who is here, but yeah, so rooftop units, I think our design team worked with Carrie to arrive at a parapet wall solution for rooftop mounted units. We will have a mechanical room within the confines of the building, and that'll need to be serviced by a door, obviously, but it shouldn't require additional screening exterior to the building, unless I've misstated. Matt Rinka.
Hello, thank you for having me, Matt Rinka, 756 North Milwaukee Street.
We have a mechanical room within the building, so it's nothing that you'll see from the exterior. And then the rooftop, I think we have a diagram in the presentation. What we've done is we've actually increased the parapet height, and we've done it's after the renderings. Oh, you don't have that. Okay. So what we did is there's a diagram that shows, I believe, what's the distance from the building? It should be in the presentation.
I don't have it in my presentation.
Oh, you don't?
It is in
Okay.
your packets. It's the line of sight from the building.
Yes.
Right, and that looked really,
Yeah.
really well thought out, I thought, because you even show the cars with it. Is that the one?
Yep. We wanted to be very clear that, the sight lines for this building, and all the buildings, in fact, are, we've studied it not just three-dimensionally, obviously, through the section in the drawings.
All right, so the parapets conceal the rooftop units.
Correct. So it's not just screening on the units themselves. We've actually elevated the entire building itself
Okay.
to screen.
And I'm sure you laid this out well, Matt.
Yep.
You're an expert at what you do, but just so the mechanical room's big enough that the fire riser is far enough off the electrical service that
Yes.
when it goes in, you don't go, oops.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Because you do need the clearance between that.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. That's where.
Yeah.
Look at the site plan, that is the mechanical room itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just guessing at the size of it, but haven't been in them. I'm guessing you're gonna need 1,200 amp service, depending on what you need. We did run into that in one of our other businesses.
Okay.
Where the fire riser was too close to the service,
Sure.
and it caused a lot of headaches.
Yep.
Word of
Yeah.
warning.
We'll definitely make sure.
Mr. Dickman.
Okay, I've got two items. My first one is based on all three buildings we're going to talk about this evening, B5, B1, and C1. And that is, you've got these divided into what tenants would be. Is that flexible? In other words, if you had a tenant that wanted two of these spaces, could you take out a wall or I mean, is it flexible, the whole design, I guess?
Yeah, and if you have any prospects for a tenant that would like two of these spaces, they can call Dan Rosenfeld. No, yeah, we have the ability, we are working through letters of intent, moving towards leases with a number of tenants right now. Those locations will get locked in, and that will leave us flexibility in the other spaces. So yes, there may be fewer. In fact, the B1 building, it's hard to refer to it because it's two buildings, but the B1 building on Main Street, that building, for example, we've contemplated that as a single user, which will bring in additional discussion when we get to that portion of this this evening. That could become two users as well. So yes, we do anticipate flexibility.
Okay, there is some flexibility. And then the only other item was those trash containers that you have kind of like in the middle of the parking lot. It just seems like a place there. I just can't see them there because you're going to be having people bringing things out. You need big trucks to come in and pick up those dumpsters, and it just seems like it could be, people could be in the way. It could be obstructing traffic, etc. Comment.
We've talked a lot about garbage, and one of the things that we do need is a truck to be able to pull in and pull out. In an ideal environment, they would actually be located up against Drexel, so a truck could pull all the way in and lift the thing up. These would be rollaway dumpsters, and where we have them located now does allow a truck to make a relatively straightforward in and out. I don't think we could have enough site room to put them somewhere where they won't at some point park somebody in. Fortunately, these are rollaways, they move fast, and we anticipate that it would be appropriate given Sean Phelan and my experience in other urban environments where we have to solve for these types
Okay,
of uses.
so you've looked at this pretty closely. Thank you.
Would it be fair to say that we're swapping a drive-up window from one building to the other window? Or other building?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that to be accurate. I mean, we talked internally about this issue after receiving staff's report, and staff did a very good job. Staff is working off of an established document. Internally, we've talked about drive-throughs a lot over the period of this process. The B1, B2 buildings, because of the lack of curb cut, entry into them, but the role of them on the plan, if we were to put a drive-through there, we actually believe it would degrade the overall value of the site plan. We've done something here that's different that we haven't really talked about. There was a B4 building that was on 6th Street, and that was a building that was dropped on, and it was a small little kind of 3,000 square foot building. One, it's hard to develop. You need one user, and building a building for one user is overly expensive. But what we thought was important was to create a harder edge along Drexel. The original plan showed this broad expanse of open parking along Drexel between the buildings at the corner of Drexel and Main Street, and then over at the corner of Drexel and 6th Street. What we did is we've done these two buildings turning the corner, so we're holding a hard edge all the way down Main Street with a cool little courtyard environment on the corner, and then extending a longer building along Drexel. So we've thought about what the urban environment would feel like, and we believe that this does a more effective job than what the original plan did at creating that environment, particularly on Main Street, and we traded, in our minds, the drive-through from B1 or B2 over to the building at B5, where we thought it was more appropriate.
Gary?
I was just going to say, as someone who's been involved in the master planning from the very beginning in this area, I think, a lot of the text was written by Grafe, our partner on the master planning. I think there may have been a miscommunication because our graphics did show the drive up window as a possibility, I remember a lot of the discussions that revolved around the drive up, drive through discussion, and I don't recall ever, promoting any type of drive up along Main Street. I think that would have been very sort of anti-pedestrian. So I think the way we had planned it in this is actually very consistent with at least the discussions that I recall during the design process.
Yeah, Carrie? I'll get to you. Carrie?
I want to provide a couple of clarifications. What's on your screen right now is actually the original development proposal that was included in the adopted 2013 plan. The B5 building is not shown with a drive-through. And the text is actually the same as what is in the text now. There was an amendment in 2014 that changed the build-to zone for the hotel, but the text did not change and this map did not change. There was also an extensive amendment process that was done just last year in 2015. Again, the text was not changed and there was no change to the use table. Staff, again, is not making any kind of comment on the appropriateness or whether or not, it's something that we would support or not support, whether it's a good idea, whether it's something that would make sense based on how Drexel Town Square has developed since the original concept. What staff is saying is the text clearly states that drive up and drive through windows and drive through lanes are allowed in the B1 and B2 buildings for this particular area. And staff is not making any comments on whether or not that should be the way it is. Staff is saying that's how it's worded, and that's why the recommendation is for an amendment to the PUD if the Plan Commission feels that it's appropriate to have a drive-up or drive-through window in this building.
Right, I get all that. To me, looking at whether this version or a modern version, it makes more sense to have, whether we allowed it in B1, B2, and now we may allow it in B5, clearly it makes more sense to have it in B5, given the way this thing lays out and given Main Street and given the potential uses of the properties that are on the west and the north side of this development.
And that's for the Plan Commission to determine, but that would be considered as part of the amendment process.
Yeah, we get that. We get that. All right, Commissioner Crowe.
Mayor, to your point, original question, can we drive up versus drive through in this use, in this building? It seems like there's some agreement that it makes sense and fits. Your original question, Mayor, was limiting that moving forward, or in the amendment, declaring it a drive up versus a drive through, I think is significant. How do we do that?
It's stated in the PUD for the uses that are allowed that a restaurant with a drive-through facility is a conditional use. Financial institutions with drive-through facilities are not permitted. That's the way it's stated. Again, the drive-through, drive-up window makes no distinction in the PUD. It's it's all considered in the same section. Granted, the use table is a little bit misleading because it doesn't specify the buildings for financial institutions, but the text itself does. So there is no distinction between a drive-up and a drive-through in the text.
In that being said, do we have the ability to limit this to what is now B5? Taking that away from B1 and B2, Mayor, to your point, to swap. And the way it's designed, it'd be tough to be anything but a drive-up.
When you say swap, it would still require an amendment to
Correct,
the PUD.
correct, but we could
yes.
restrict.
We
it,
all
I guess.
understand that.
So what you're saying is change the allowance from B1, B2 to specifically B5. And that's something that could be proposed, yes.
And I think another thing that's important here is I think the original contemplation of financial institution with a drive-through was contemplating a single tenant building that was a freestanding bank building with a drive-through, which often includes 3 or 4 lanes and pneumatic tubes. And
I get it. I think this is a different scenario, and I think it's palatable. I just think with some vision for the future.
Yeah, and in the past, the amendment process, generally, even though it's gone through several amendments, they're typically dealing with specific issues that are being raised at that moment. So if there was an amendment for a hotel, it's because the hotel was driving something, and that's the language that was considered at the time of that amendment. So, we are certainly comfortable with removing the drive-up or drive-through allowance for B1 and B2. We're going to build all these buildings at once. It's unlikely they would be added later. So we'd certainly be comfortable with those limitations.
Our point, I think we're looking at down the road, second generation, third
Exactly.
generation, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Concern.
Commissioner Seibert.
I have a question. The safety aspect of this drive-through. I see some major problems because you have doors exiting on the north side, okay, and go right in there. And number 2, people may even utilize this drive-through as kind of getting into the building or picking something up from one of these other buildings or facilities. I see a major problem that people could misuse this drive-through, and you get in and you run in because it's closer than maybe the parking area, and then you have no real exit. People can jam that up, plus you can walk out and get hit by a car if you're not paying attention. Number 2, you don't know what the retailer is in that drive-through. Is it coffee? Is it a bank? You still don't know. And that can vary for the traffic pattern that you have. And that's just my main concern. I am not supportive of that drive-through because it's narrow, 1 lane, and you can get stuck in there. If you want to get out, you can't.
There is a sidewalk there, right?
Yeah, there is. And if you pull a rendering up of that elevation, I believe there's a rendering that shows that elevation more clearly.
There's a sidewalk that's no different than any of the other single-lane drive-throughs we have in the city, drive-ups.
So if someone were to walk out of these doors, now I can let Dan Rosenfeld speak to this as well. One of the things that retailers really don't like is 2 front doors. And the reason for that is, one, they typically have a front of house and back of house. They also typically have, areas where they need to manage inventory, and they don't like folks being able to go both ways. So my first reaction would be, these will not be entries into these suites. This will be the locked door of the front and back door of the 2 retailers. So 1, folks are very unlikely to be entering into any of these retailers from this location. Point 2, if they were to walk out of this door, just like any retail environment, when they walk out, they will be on a sidewalk, there will be a curb, and they should expect that when they step off a curb, it's possible that traffic would be moving in front of them. And that happens in urban environments almost everywhere. And number 3, we do know who this tenant is right now. I can't speak to second generation space, but it's a financial institution, and that bank will be signing a long-term lease with lots of options. So unless Oak Creek doesn't support them, we would expect they'd be there a long time, although that can't speak to what future generation space would use it for. While I understand your concerns, certainly regarding the potential future use of the space, I just respectfully, I don't believe this is that different from an urban environment where when you walk out of a door and over a sidewalk and down a curb, you find yourself in the vehicular right-of-way as opposed to the pedestrians.
And as
See, too many problems the other tenants, maybe they want to drive through. You never know, because we don't know who these tenants are.
Well, they won't be
Therefore, you
allowed,
could
they
have-
won't be allowed to have a drive-through because it will be dedicated to the one user.
I understand that, but if we're trying to promote sometime and these people want to use that drive-through and you get more than one person, I just see a major problem here, and I don't support it.
All right, other questions or comments? Mr. Chandler?
Can you provide a little more information about, you're calling it a drive-up versus a drive-through? What are you considering the differences?
Actually, I'll let a retail guy answer that question because he lives and breathes this every day. Dan, do you mind?
Yeah, come
You'll
on.
have to come up here.
Dan Rosenfeld, 648 North Plankinton, 264 Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The difference is a menu board or a reader board with a speaker in it. That would be a drive-through, typically like you see at Chick-fil-A. Here at drive-up, there's really no introductory menu board or speaker board. That's really the difference.
And so what's your intended use, meaning what are your intended traffic patterns?
Well, today they're
customers?
designing it and developing it for a financial institution. So typically that is always manned. So you get a lollipop and the lady or the teller says, how much would you like? So yeah, so there's going to be a lot of customer interaction through that window.
Okay, and so the actual dimensions and turnaround space or stall space, height requirements, what are the details there?
Defer to Matt.
We are, the tenant, the financial institutional tenant that is proposed to go into this space, we've done, I would say, over 300 projects for this institution. Very well respected. We've allowed plenty of width in the drive lane to accommodate larger vehicles, especially. And so right now it's shown as a single lane, but I would say it's a little bit wider. It's probably about 20% wider than what you would see a typical single lane. And part of that is, again, to make sure we're providing for larger vehicles, the ability for ease of access and turning radiuses and all of those, I think, traffic things that we consider as we're pulling the design together. So you can see on the screen right now.
And are there any height requirements?
Right now,
Restriction?
sure. Right now, the only, I guess, projection over the drive lane is a canopy at the drive-up window, but it's fairly insignificant. So typical drive-through windows at a financial institution are somewhere about 8.5 feet. You can see here the drive lane that we're showing is 12 feet wide.
So when does that 8.5 feet come into play? Is it
It
at the
doesn't.
drive up?
Yeah, so at this point, you can see that we've shown a 12-foot wide drive lane around the entire building.
So if there is a vehicle that's higher than 8 feet,
Oh, no, the width of the drive lane.
Oh,
So
width.
the height of the canopy, I believe, 10-10. So 10'10". Most vehicles are certainly not at that height.
It's primarily intended to keep your money dry.
Exactly. It's more of an awning than a full covered canopy.
okay. And are those acceptable canopies? Cloth canopy? Is it cloth?
No, the drive-up window canopy, as you can see, is a metal canopy, so a little bit more permanent in appearance. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Other questions? Alderman Guzikowski.
Assistant Chief Kresick, any issues with this drive-up lane and the space needs for in case there are emergency?
Lake Cressick Fire Department, it is not a fire department access lane. So in terms of it not being a designated access lane, it does not need to meet height or width requirements. Access lanes would be determined around the perimeter of the structure generally we avoid using drive up, drive through lanes as fire department access. Now, that's not to say that we wouldn't use it in certain type of circumstances, but it is not required to be a fire department access lane.
And this lane that's going around the building, and actually, if we're going to have another one, it's probably a little better design than what's happening over at Chick-fil-A. I still have a heartburn over what's going on there, because I think it's very unsafe as we're passing through there because of the blind spot with the dumpsters there. So that being said, compared to that, I think this is a better design.
All right, shifting to something else, since I said I don't have a problem with essentially swapping. Yeah, I'll get to you. Swapping it from one building to the other. I think this isn't a restaurant use, so that doesn't give me any heartburn. The cladding on the outside, is that meant to be similar to the cladding on the Flair building?
Yeah, so the buildings, again, relate to each other. So in this building, we've got the white tones with the, now here, stainless steel panel instead of the Nichihha panel. We've got a mix of materials that is supposed to remain extremely consistent with the palette that we've already established. One of the things that planning department did note is that utility brick is not allowed. One of the things that's harder with smaller buildings is establishing scale. I'll let the design team speak to this. We believe that the use of utility brick here is important to establish an appropriate sense of scale between the panel system that we'd be using, which is fundamental to tying together the different buildings and the kind of the material palette that we're using, and that this panel and that utility brick have a scale that resonates with each other. I'll let the design team handle that and the other cladding questions as they have a sample.
That's not allowed currently, right? Utility brick isn't allowed?
No, utility brick is not allowed.
Okay.
So I have a sample of the brick that we're proposing to use. This is a modular, correct. So we
Sure.
similar to what we used at the new Cafe Hollander in the Mequon Town Center. Similar, I believe that we actually used a utility brick, and if you want to see what that looks like, it looks pretty nice. The stainless steel panel that I just passed to Commissioner Chancellor is the same product that was used on the new Art Museum edition downtown. So the Milwaukee Art Museum edition, very beautiful. It's got a really sort of a beautiful iridescent feel to it. Certainly not like a typical metal panel. So really those are the two major materials on the building.
You're asking us to amend the drive-up window from one building to another. You're asking us to allow utility brick to be used on the exterior. Any other asks? Because we've already spent an hour talking about it.
A couple of users from Commissioner Dickman.
Commissioner Johnston.
Just one comment on the drive-through. When we get to signage, with the canopy on the drive-through, you would need to have a clearance sign someplace on there. Let's switch from drive-throughs. How about parking lot lights? It's called out for the cyclone light, the short light, to be used in here. Now, on this section of 6th Street, we're using the taller Guardco, and across the street at Freighter, that also is using the Guardco light. Is this going to continue on with the Guardco or the short light for the cyclones that we have in the residential area? Short lights.
I think it's important, if you walk over to the site, sometimes drawings are deceiving. It's not that big of a site, to be perfectly honest.
It's just more lights that we really don't need out here.
And so, which is why we feel that going to a really tall light would just look out of scale in that space.
Because they're going to be stationed outside of median areas in the parking lot, or they'll be set up on median bases. So they're going to be up 3-4 feet, then light up on top of it. Still have the height restriction of 25 feet, so we shouldn't have any issue with that.
Gary, what's the alternative if they don't use this utility brick then?
Per the PUD, face brick, finished style or finished grade materials are to be used. So basically, just a standard brick that's 4 inches thick to meet code requirements.
Have we made any allowances for this kind of brick anywhere else in the development?
Not to my knowledge, at least not that has been specified.
So utility brick is just a larger scale, right? So it's just a larger version of that brick.
That's correct, yeah. So the quality of the brick isn't any different, it's just a larger
thickness.
format. Yeah.
It's just a larger.
No, just the size. So the modular brick is smaller. It's what you might see on a residential building versus the larger format is something that you would see more typically on a commercial. So
It's the exact same
exact
brick,
same quality.
bigger.
We have a thickness
Yeah,
issue, Mayor, is my
thickness.
question then?
Yeah,
Is
it's
that a
a
problem?
thickness.
No,
it's
This
thick,
isn't-
it's
No, it's the
thicker.
same.
Does the thickness
I believe
mean?
we're using the same forward.
Hold on a
Same
second.
depth.
Gary, is it a thickness issue with this brick? Is that what with the?
There's two issues. One, in the PUD, it says utility grade materials should only be used on facades of the building not visible from publicly accessible areas. And two, we have to make sure that the brick is 4 inches thick. So we've heard that it's going to be 4 inches thick. Now we have to deal with the fact that the PUD says utility grade materials can't be used on publicly visible areas.
I think the key thing here is that's utility grade. This is a size of brick, not a grade of brick. So utility grade would be like CMU, unfinished CMU.
Right, so this is a language issue.
I think this is a semantics
So
issue.
we need to clarify that on the plans
All right,
then.
okay.
Yeah, utility brick is a size of brick, same overall dimension this way, but a different dimension this way.
Was Mr. Morales going to come and put the hammer down on that one or no?
How'd we do? Yeah. It's not a grade,
Go ahead.
it's a
Can you
size.
just clarify what Carrie said with the thickness? I didn't hear you say. The thickness is a non-issue.
Thickness is a non-issue. It's the same kind of brick, it's just a slightly taller and wider brick.
I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we're good.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Johnston.
This is modular brick.
Yes.
That's correct.
The utility brick is at 9 inch, is that, or 16?
So we were deceived by the
Yeah,
sample.
Exactly, so.
It's 4 tall, 4 deep, 16,
All right.
8 tall.
So that seems to be a non-issue. So
That's- I
we're
believe
we're
that's
back
not
to
an issue.
really,
We're good with that issue.
all right,
Not
so
an ask.
it's whether or not this commission is okay with, in my mind, swapping the drive-up window from previously approved buildings to this building for the use they've spelled out, which Commissioner Krell and I agree should be laid out as a non-restaurant use.
And
They're
there's
spelled
ano-
out.
There's another issue with the glazing,
Okay, what's the glazing issue?
using spandrel versus clear.
Staff has worked with the architect on this, and the issue is just that we need to make sure that the elevations specify the panels that are going to be spandrels specifically versus the clear. We have the percentages have been presented to us. We want to make sure that each of the panels as presented, we can identify clearly as being one or the other.
So it's a non-issue,
It's just a
as long as they spell it out.
It's a clarification on the revised plan submitted for post-plan commission review.
Okay.
I do have another question
ahead.
about the drive
Up.
up. There you go, thank you. So are the deliveries going to happen for each of those locations using that drive up?
No, all deliveries will be located on the south side of the building, which is the traditional ingress and egress out of each of those retail spaces.
Thank you.
If the commission is comfortable with that amendment, allowing the drive-up window, in my mind, again, this is my language, swapping it from the other previously approved building to this building for a specific use, a non-restaurant use, someone make a motion in that to say that.
Oh, wait, I have another question.
All right, when you have questions, get them all out so we're not jumping back and forth. Commissioner Chandler.
The ATM, can you provide information about this ATM location?
So this is just an island location where we've got the ability to do a slipstream. The financial institutions rely heavily on three forms of business. They've got the folks that drive up and are convenience dropping things off or taking money out. The ATM is a secondary form a primary form of their interaction with their customer. We believe that the location as proposed on plan, on the screen now, they're perfect, is one that is, one, innocuous, and two, is utilizing an area that we could not otherwise program for parking effectively. And so we created an environment where cars are able to pull in, they're able to both enter the ATM, use it, and return out of the ATM drive lane. They can also queue within it. We don't believe that it creates traffic challenges. We believe it's something that also limits the number of folks that are going to try to park elsewhere and congest traffic in the drive-through lane. So there's not a drive-through ATM, which would add additional traffic in that drive lane. Rather, it utilizes the location in the parking lot that we otherwise struggled with.
My next question is in regards to the parking at the end of the drive up. Can you provide more information about the flow of traffic?
So what would happen is someone would enter into the drive-up lane by progressing north through the center of the site. They would then proceed west in the drive-through lane. They'd come around the building. There would be a clearly marked pedestrian crosswalk at that location. They would wait there. They'd be able to identify what traffic, if any, was occurring in that double-loaded tray of parking directly south of the building. And assuming that the way is clear, they would progress. They would progress to the east and then make their turn to get out of the center. And get down into the alley. And we think folks will use the alley if they're going to go to the east, and if they're going to go back the other direction, they'll probably loop back around onto 6th Street and use 6th Street in the fully controlled intersection to get onto Drexel.
So for those that are parking close to the exit, how are they able to see that traffic is coming out of that driveway?
There's 2 points of obligation there. One is for the folks parked there to look, and the other is for the folks coming out to look. I think the landscape plan, which I believe would need to come back to the commission for a separate approval or no. I think with staff, what we would do is we would have a series of conversations to ensure that we all believe that an appropriate vision triangle is maintained so that folks are able to see across. I think right now, in my opinion, it's more heavily landscaped than I would suggest. In that location, I would move some of that landscaping outboard towards 6th Street and maintain a stronger view corridor between the drive lane and the parking.
And I also have in my notes that there are supposed to be some fabric coverings over several of the windows. Can you provide more information?
So this will be a topic of conversation in the next building. Hopefully, we've covered a bunch of our topics already, though.
So not for the B5?
Yeah, we show awnings, and this is something that we've done in each of the developments that I've participated in. So awnings invariably become something that tenants either want or don't want. What we do is specify what they can do, but we don't do it, and we don't force them to do it. Some folks don't want to cover their windows. Some folks don't want signage on an awning. Some folks don't want that. So what we do when we come through, we show you what it could become. It allows us to create specifications in our leases and in our documents with our potential tenants so that we know what they can do and what they would do if they had that opportunity. So we do not propose to install these. We do propose that this is what would be installed if they were.
And are you providing the option to add signage to those awnings?
That would be a question for the Planning Commission. We are working currently with staff on arriving at a kind of a master signage criteria for the first phase of the Main Street buildings. And in conversation, and Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong, we've talked about using that signage criteria as a baseline for a master signage criteria for the B1, B5, and C1 buildings as well, so that Planning Commission, when a signage proposal comes to you, you have a document other than the very long PDD that you can refer to with staff's recommendation to make signage approvals.
Back to the drive-through, so if there are stalled cars, what's the plan to get those out of the area?
mostly honking and waving. And then beyond that, we hope that folks can just move through an orderly process like they would anywhere else, where we would need folks to back out and other folks would move forward.
So it's possible they have to back out.
It's always possible that a car could break down in a place that creates discomfort for someone else.
Like every other drive-through.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, there's just nothing we can do. I mean, if a car broke down in the middle of the drive aisle between all the parking, you'd need to call a truck and get them out of there. I mean, it's just the way those work.
So how long is the actual driveway or the drive-up lane?
I don't know,
Start
from
to
beginning to
finish.
end, the
Yeah,
building
start.
is, how long is the building? 7,900 square feet, 60 feet deep. It's 120 lineal feet, something like that. So from the beginning to the end is probably 120 plus 70, 100, it's probably 220 feet from the beginning to when you get out. That was a really rough guess, by the way.
Okay. And I know one of your comments earlier identified that if the drive-up was on the B1 site, that it would degrade the site plan. Can you provide a little more information on?
Well,
what
we
that
just don't
means
think,
exactly?
we don't want cars circulating over by Main Street. We want pedestrians on Main Street and businesses on Main Street. And we just believe that, I mean, if you imagine pick Chick-fil-A up, and this is not any derogation to Chick-fil-A, but pick Chick-fil-A up and put it on Main Street, it doesn't feel like Main Street anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Corral?
Real quickly, hopefully save some time later, just on the awnings, the fact that we're given the option, so we eliminate having a building with awnings all the way across the front and an outdated feel. I think it's a great plan, and hopefully you come up with a combination of what works and doesn't.
We found that folks with light sense, like if we had a soft goods retailer, this is south facing. If we have a soft goods retailer that wants to put their clothing up in the windows, they're going to want the ability to generate some shade on those to protect their goods. I have a chocolatier in Mequon. She didn't anticipate that the western sun was going to melt inventory, so we had to come up with a solution for that. So we do it this way just so that all parties involved know what could happen.
I had one more question.
Go ahead.
I forgot about it. The bike racks. So there was a suggestion to add bike racks to the area. Is that plausible?
Anything is certainly plausible. I'd be interested philosophically to have a deeper conversation about whether it's more appropriate to get those more towards the town square and Main Street as opposed to in what more or less is a suburban parking and shopping environment. Folks on bikes, in my experience, are also more willing to walk a little bit. And so we would work with staff to identify some locations. I'm not exactly sure where on this plan they would go. I would rather not trade parking stalls for bike racks at this point in these couple of environments, but we'd certainly work with staff to try to find the right location for some additional parking, bike parking.
Gary, a procedural question. So if someone made a motion for this item, would they have to do a separate motion for the amendment for the allowed drive up
What would the motion for the amendment be?
to allow it?
Allow it, not a drive-through, a drive-by,
Drive up window.
Well, it would require an official amendment, which is a separate process.
So we don't have to do anything tonight on that, or do we would have to actually, are you asking us to create the amendment tonight?
No, you can't create the amendment tonight, is
Do
what
we
I'm
have to
saying.
make a motion? So
And you make, I believe you could make a motion for approval conditional upon
Correct.
the passage of that amendment.
Yes.
And
If that's what you're asking, Mr. Mayor, yes, I can provide you with a motion or a condition of approval to include in the motion. You wouldn't have to do a separate motion.
Okay,
That's good, yeah.
all right. So if somebody wants to make that motion, if there's no other questions?
That's part of the
Part of the original
13.
motion. Yeah.
Will that be 12 then?
Or 13, yeah.
David will make a motion. At the plan.
Can I, I'm sorry, Dan.
Yeah, okay.
I actually had a question myself regarding the similar materials. Now, since you provided material samples, what would similar materials be?
it's good question for the architect.
And just generally, why would we allow that kind of language in a specific proposal? Just tell us what you're using and then we'll
Sure. a lot of times, you know, a brick might be discontinued. So we're going to try to find another brick, or a metal panel color might be discontinued, or there are competing metal panel products out there. So the idea isn't to say that this particular product is the only product we can use.
So admittedly, reviewing the plans, it talks about burnished block or similar. So it's not a question of a specific burnished block being called out like this one, which is Premier White Granite, and this is a burnished block product like you can see on Main Street right now. What's conceivable, though, is that a material that's not burnished block would look like this in fundamental material ways and could be swapped for it, and you wouldn't know that it was burnished block versus another material. I think that where we're interested in some flexibility, so I don't know what would change at this point, but let's just say for the sake of argument that the stainless steel panel changed. And then let's say that we found an alternative panel that was a zinc panel, a pre-patinated zinc panel. Fundamentally similar in the way that it's presenting to the street and the way it's presenting to the pedestrian. Quality of material is similar. We would request that we have the ability to get approval from staff for that type of substitution. So if it's called stainless steel, but it ends up being copper or something else, we'd look for that kind of
How
flexibility.
about similar material with the approval of staff? After review by staff.
I think the concern was just the or similar leaves it so wide open as to making staff kind of make that change. I mean, we did have a change on the two Main Street buildings, and that had to come back to the Plan Commission for that approval. So that's kind of the thing that we were thinking of is, well, are you going to change this from metal to a completely different product? So I'm not so concerned about metal changing to metal or brick changing from one manufacturer to another or something like that. So I think that was what the concern was, and that's what we were trying to avoid with that condition. So can we specify something on the elevations that it's not just or similar, that it be, I don't know what the wording would be, but
That's where we're looking for guidance.
it's something that's less nebulous, I guess.
Sure. Steve Morello, 756 North Milwaukee. The change on the B3C3 buildings, just to, if people don't remember, it was primarily masonry on the backsides of those buildings, and what we changed it to was a Nichiha, which is a cement board panel, which you now see going up in the building. It's a substantial material difference between the two products, which is why we brought it back to the Plan Commission. I think what we can do here is, when we say or similar, is because, as Blair mentioned, you go through the process of trying to pick your products, and sometimes they're not available. Sometimes the lead times are so extraneous because of the building market that it doesn't allow you to finish the building. So we look for alternate materials. In here, we could, if they could make it a condition of it, it could be these materials or similar, so long as it maintains the same design intent. That we're bringing the same exact type of materials to the table, and if staff wants to take a look at that, by all means, we'll bring it through staff, but it maintains the same design intent. We're not changing the look of the building. We're simply changing the material because of availability or other, circumstances we may not have control over.
Staff happy with the term design intent?
Staff will work with the applicant, and let me think about how I can change this condition.
Okay.
Which one is that?
We don't anticipate substantive change, whether
Just keep in
stainless.
mind, I said this last Plan Commission meeting, when you interject new things into the discussion, it always complicates the process.
Try not to complicate.
Right. And lately, it seems like everything is complicated. Even stuff that
Just
isn't.
with
even
me?
stuff that
Is
isn't
that just about me, or is
No,
that
this is-
no?
this is
okay.
not just
I know,
about
okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, I'm venting about other things.
Okay.
All right, so if you'd like to make a motion, Carrie, please chime in if we need to clarify a
On
point.
12.
She
Oh,
might
all right,
add that
okay.
one.
Kakavich will make a motion that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans submitted by Blair Williams Wired Properties for the property located at 7940 South 6th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that detailed plans for signage, including building sign program, are reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission prior to the submission of permit applications. 3, that the final photometric and lighting plans indicating the approved luminaire type, pole type, color, and height for Drexel Town Square are submitted for final approval by the Director of Community Development upon written recommendation of the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits. 4, that the building material language, Carrie, is revised to meet the requirements of the DTS MUPDD and municipal code for face brick, minimum 4 inches.
I think we can just strike that and just say that the brick is a minimum of 4 inches thick.
That the building materials are a minimum 4-inch thickness.
Brick.
Brick.
So yeah, brick, it has to be 4 inches thick.
That the building brick material is 4 inches minimum thick. 5, that any proposed spandrel glass panels are clearly identified on a revised plan submitted for final approval by the Director of Community Development. No more than 50% of the glazing requirement may be spandrel. 6, that the
And let me jump in here for you on 6. This is my proposed condition, that the specified building materials as listed on the proposed plans and with the conditions above are approved. Minor material changes may be made by staff. Substantive changes to the specified building materials will require additional plan commission review. Is that acceptable?
Perfect.
So moved on condition
Sounds
6.
good, yeah.
7, that all mechanical equipment and transformers, ground, building, and rooftop are screened from view. 8, that all of the elements in the proposed are constructed as presented and approved by the Plan Commission. 9, that all revised plans, site, building, landscape, dumpster details, etc., are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 10, that the plans addressing grading, drainage, and stormwater quality, including the use of stormwater best management practice, be approved by the city engineer prior to the issuance of building permits. 11, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District and the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility. 12,
Let me help you with that one.
thank you.
That a revision to the DTS MUPDD to allow a drive-through facility or drive-up facility for the B5 building is approved prior to submission of building permit applications.
So moved as stated for condition 12.
Corral seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seeper, no.
Chandler, no.
All right. So now we're going to revisit a lot of these same issues on the next one.
Yeah, a lot of the same issues, but no drive-through, so it should be much easier.
All right, so I'm not going to read the thing, but Carrie, if you don't have to read everything over again, that would be helpful, unless you specifically think it's important to do that. You know, obviously the substantive or things that are different, hit those. You're 1/3 of the way there.
More than 1/3
Well,
of
if you
the
go
way
by
there.
time, I hope.
Okay, this application is for the B1 building, which is on the east side of the property that we were just talking about. Actually, they're two separate parcels, but they can be looked at as one property for the purpose of parking. Substantive changes. There's 2 buildings now instead of 1. We have some permeable pavers that are in the parking lot. Those are part of the best management practices concepts that are in the DTS MUPDD. The building on the north along Drexel is a multi-tenant building. They're showing approximately 4 tenants in that space. The building on the southern end is proposed to be a single tenant, potentially a restaurant. No tenants have been announced at this point, however. Both are single story. As mentioned in the previous report, this is a shared parking lot, so the total number of parking stalls required would be 127. For these 2 buildings combined, 60 to 88 would be required, but again, combined parking, so the shared would be required for both the B1 and B5 buildings, 88 to 128, again, 127 shown. There's another dumpster enclosure that's shown on the south end here. We got several pedestrian connections that are along Drexel and 6th. There's an outdoor seating area that is identified here that kind of ties the two buildings together, and you'll see it better in the renderings. So why don't I just get to the renderings?
Japanese steakhouse?
So the east elevation is actually what's going to be facing 6th Street, or I'm sorry, Main Street. And then the north elevation is along Drexel Avenue.
I probably made it more difficult by making you pick.
All right.
It's all right.
Northeast and southeast elevation, these are a little bit difficult to get a feel for the building using these, so I'm just going to skip right to the renderings themselves. This is that courtyard area. You can see the two buildings are facing each other and combined kind of by this pergola structure that is between the two, creating kind of an arcade walkthrough from the outdoor seating area to the parking lot. Again, this is looking at the corner of Drexel and Main Street. So the multi-tenant building is along Drexel here, and then the single-tenant building along Main Street. Another view of that outdoor seating area between the two buildings. You can see that it does connect into the pedestrian walk on Main Street. This is the southern end of the proposed single-tenant. This is another proposed outdoor seating area. Now, this is where the Plan Commission needs to have a little bit of clarity. This is what Blair is proposing to have as the landlord installed and delivered package. Did I get that correct?
Correct.
Okay. This is looking from the parking lot. These are the elements that would be provided before the tenants move in. This is what the proposed build-out could look like. Again, we have the identified in the plans as having the retailer supplied fabric awnings on the multi-tenant building, and then the build out of that pergola covered seating area on the south for the single tenant area. That would be provided by the tenant according to this proposal. We recommend bike racks. We're totally willing to work with the applicant and the architects to determine where it would be most appropriate to place those bike racks. Signage, again, shown in general locations. Those will come at a later date for specifics. We have the same concern or question about the parking lot lighting, showing the Cyclone versus the Guardco. Similar kind of building materials that would be used. We also have some planter boxes that are proposed. Same comment regarding the or similar materials. You can disregard the comment about the utility brick. We've worked that out. Same comment about spandrel and the rooftop mechanicals, the corrugated metal. Those are all the same comments as with the B5 building. The one comment that we had was that we started to talk about with the B1 or the B5 building, and that is the landlord installed versus the potential future build out. The concern is that while we're shown this potential future build out, it may not happen. And the aesthetic that we're going for here and the treatment of the space works best with all of the elements combined. The concern is that if everything is left to the tenants and the tenants don't want to do it, we will never see this happen. So that's the one concern that we have about having one thing built versus somebody else building another. I think that's it. Those are the only comments that I had that were different from the B5 building. Staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Blair Williams Wire Properties for the property located at 7901 South Main Street, subject to conditions 1 through 11. Mr. Mayor.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the original two buildings, the concepts that we were shown at that time, did they match identically to what we're seeing now built out?
No.
Okay, so.
They showed awnings, and here the biggest issue is the trellis detail that you see there in the image right now on the south end of that building. What if that's not a restaurant?
Right.
I mean, if we build it and it's not a restaurant, all we're doing is covering up the retail storefront that's supposed to be the showplace for the tenant that's there. And what we've done Had we, for example, now granted Rinkechung actually designed Bel Air Cantina's awnings and their trellis and everything, but what if it was a different restaurant and they had a different architect? We couldn't guess what it was that they were going to do. So we show this because we want to demonstrate what the design intent would be. So what would happen is a tenant would come to us and ask us for approval for what it is that they want to do. This is establishing a baseline for everyone to understand for the types of improvements that we would look for them to do. Now, they may not want, they might be a business that, for example, uses umbrellas. And let's say it was a German restaurant and they wanted to use German beer labeled Carlsberg or whatever, I don't even think that's German, umbrellas. Well, this wouldn't be consistent with their branding. So we want to be attentive to who our future tenants would be. And that's why we always go through and do this. Now, the wood trellis, that's the detail connecting the two buildings, we would build that. The wood detail that you can see if you go back one picture and look at that view, there is a wood detail on the left side of that southern building. It does wrap around and do kind of a screen around the top of that, and it establishes a break in materials. We just so strongly believe that we need to be responsive to our retailers. We don't have a user for that building yet. We'd love for it to be a terrific restaurant, but if it's not, we would hate to shortchange our ability to find a strong retailer to go in there.
Okay. Questions, comments? Commissioner Corral.
I guess just a quick comment on some of these outside areas that look wonderful. We're still in Wisconsin. I think putting everything into the fact that it's going to be something that this fits for 12 months out of the year, I don't know. I don't think it's the worst thing not to have that build out. The picture prior to, I think, leaves a lot of options.
And we show garage doors, and we're trying to create this environment that's consistent with the balance of Main Street. We have a lot of garage doors on Main Street now. But I think you're right, and we show what would be a fire pit here. I'd ask the fire chief if open fire pits are allowed in the city of Oak Creek, because I don't know. I would like to talk about that. And then could you talk to Brookfield for me? So in any case, we're showing kind of an amenity package there, and again, it depends on who's there. I will say that it's unlikely that our preferred outcome would be a heavily concrete, unlandscaped environment. That doesn't do anyone any good. So even in the alternative, we believe that there will be landscaping that's done there, whether it be by planter box or other by tenants, because that's what you want to do in front of your store.
I think those of us who've been here for the whole Drexel Town Square thing, which I think is all of us, understand how it works. Things can change, things evolve. I said this to Alderman Bekavich earlier. Everything that we were shown originally has actually played out in a better, more visually appealing way to me. If I walk around Drexel Town Square, even with all this construction, it already looks cool. It looks better than the pictures looked when Matt or whoever showed them to me. That's a good result. So I wouldn't anticipate, since you're one of the guys that were involved from the beginning, that we'd have that much variation from the same result.
No, that's certainly, we're heading into this with all the vigor that we entered into the balance of it.
Alderman Bekavich.
I agree with Commissioner Corral. It looks dynamite. I'd love to say that you could just build it the way it is and somebody's going in there, but I totally get where you're coming from. I would definitely steer somebody in that direction. One thing I would like to see, whether Mike Kresick allows the fire pit or not, is the planter boxes.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. It kind of finishes out that corner regardless and just gives a nice seating area. And again, I would encourage working with staff to get some bicycle racks somewhere in there.
I have a question.
Commissioner Chandler.
So this building looks a little different than the B5 with the colors. Can you share the materials?
Yeah, materials here are actually consistent with other materials you'll see on Main Street. I think, so the previous brick shown sitting in front of Commissioner Johnson at this point is a white version. This is kind of a charcoal version. This is a burnished block, and actually what we've done with this is B5 does not relate directly to the B1 and C1 buildings, which are our Main Street buildings. This does interact directly with those buildings, And what you'll see here is a fairly consistent material palette to what we have in the other two buildings on Main Street.
Use county for your materials?
We have. It depends on who has the right product. We've ended up with non-generic bricks in a lot of ways, trying to find a specific look. I think these were not. I think these were Belden. The white one is county. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Elder Statesman Wally Dickman.
Okay. I don't think it has much to do with it, but on building B5, we did make an amendment so that we could have, allowing the drive-through, they want to call it. But was that originally on the plans for B1? So now do we have to say something about, we don't have to say anything more? Okay.
The allowance is not a prescription. Okay. So in other words, just because it's allowed doesn't mean that it's required.
Okay.
So
I'm not
that's
sure we're not
that's
in
how
trouble.
we would handle it with this building. I would just like to reiterate that while staff completely appreciates and understands the need to respond to tenants and their needs and wishes, the issue is just presenting something that may never actually happen. So that's why the recommendation was to include all of the elements as presented and not leave them all to tenant choice. It was kind of the same recommendation as previously mentioned. We just don't want to have something like this that's completely built out, shown everything, and then somebody says, well, wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to propose.
Okay,
that
so the applicant has already agreed to that connection between the two buildings, that whatever materials.
The pergola, yes.
Okay, he's already agreed to that. Did you agree to the kind of that green separation in that courtyard area? Did you agree?
I think we'll work with staff to arrive at a landscaping solution there for sure.
Obviously, you can't put a fire put in if it's just going to be a seating area for a non-restaurant, so
Right.
it's like a fair trade-off. And then the other thing was the pergola on the other side. I agree with the applicant. You're not going to cover up a storefront if it's not a restaurant with that thing because it blocks the people's vision of the.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion previously was that we just pull all of these images from the application and you approve the other one. We just tried to be a little bit more proactive in providing where we thought it might go. We understand that we would need to come back, so.
So when you're referring to the other one, do you mean the one that's showing now or the one?
The way
with
it
the
looks right
grass
now,
and
that's
fire?
what pulling out the ones that show the larger trellis structure, and then
Okay.
here it keeps the pergola, it keeps the wood that wraps around the building on the B1 building. All of that's part of our package.
Everybody understand that? Okay, anyone have any other questions or comments? Motion.
David shall make a motion that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plan submitted by Blair Williams Wared Property for the properties located at 7901 South Main Street with the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that the planters are installed concurrently with the building and the outdoor seating areas. Carrie, do we need to revise that? What we talked about? That's condition 2.
That the planters are installed concurrently removed with the buildings. Concurrently with outdoor
They
seating
said they'd
areas.
work with you about the planters.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that those kind of enclose that area, and, you know, to the extent that we may end up with pedestrian activity heading east and west on Drexel, that actually may be one of the places folks would cut through these buildings, and we show this cut through. It shows it fully closed. I'd like to work with staff to arrive at an appropriate solution there in the event that this isn't a single tenant, so people could actually get off of that courtyard area onto the sidewalks.
Need some language to indicate that.
I think if we just work with staff to arrive at that, I mean,
Work with staff.
Lem-
Go ahead.
Go on,
Carrie.
and I'll come back to number 2.
Okay. Number 3, that detailed plans for signage, including a building sign program, are reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission prior to the submission of permit applications. 3, that the final photometric and lighting plans indicating the approved luminaire type, pole type, color, and height for Drexeltown Square are submitted for final approval by the Director of Community Development upon the written recommendation of the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits. 5, that the building materials.
Let me help you out with that one.
Yes, please. Is it just the 4-inch minimum again?
Yes, that all brick meets the 4-inch minimum.
That all brick meets the 4-inch minimum thickness. 6, the proposed spandrel glass panels are clearly identified on the revised plan, north facade of the multi-tenant building only. No more than 50% of the glazing requirement may be spandrel. 7, that specific building materials listed on the proposed plans and with the conditions above are approved. Any changes to the specific building materials will require additional plan commission review. 8, that all mechanical equipment and transformers, ground, building, and rooftop are screened from view. 9, that all of the elements in the proposed are constructed as,
That's another one that we need to change.
we'll leave 9 go for now.
What we say on the other?
That, you gonna work on 9 also?
I'm
Okay.
going to work on
10, that all revised plans, site building, landscape, dumpster details, etc. are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 11, that plans addressing grading, drainage, and stormwater quality, including the use of stormwater best management practices, be approved by the city engineer prior to the issuance of building permits. 12, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District and the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility. And then we will revisit conditions 2 and 9
here.
shortly.
These are my recommendations. Strike number 2 as the planters are shown on the landscape plans, and we should have the landscape plans shown in condition 10 for revisions.
So moved.
That 9 is revised to say that all of the elements in the proposal specified as landlord installed are constructed as presented and approved by the Plan Commission.
So moved.
Hickman seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnson, aye.
David Chai.
Reedy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Roller.
Secret eye.
Chandler, aye.
All right, last one. Carrie? Doug picked a good week to be on vacation.
Okay, so we have the C1 building, which is on the other side of Main Street, if my stuff will work with me here. There we go. Proposed multi-tenant building on that side right there. Similar building materials to the B5 building. The metal panels are a bit different, different color, structure, that kind of thing. Shared parking lot with the Mattress Firm and PetSmart building. You can see there is a proposal for a dumpster enclosure right here in the parking lot. There was just a comment as to whether or not trucks could actually get in there easily to access it and remove the trash, but that's something that that's something to consider for plan revision. Also, the use of permeable pavers is proposed in this part of the parking lot here. Again, that's another BMP, a best management practice identified in the DTS MUPDD. It's a single story. This was another one of those plans where there were C1 and C2 buildings called out here, and instead we have we favor a single building, but it's a multi-tenant, so it kind of achieves the same goal here. Landscaping plans have been proposed. The comment was that we have some revisions to the landscape plan to kind of mirror match, make a cohesive treatment of Drexel Avenue, similar to what the Mattress Firm and PetSmart portion of the property did. These are the proposed elevations for the building. Again, similar kinds of materials, just a different, little bit different color palette. The different materials that are going to be used here. The introduction of what I think is actually an interesting concept, a charred wood kind of accent material, gives it a little bit different feel. Again, all the retailers have access, main access on the east side, so that'll be from the parking lot. A couple of the retailers will also have doors that are on Main Street. If possible, if we can incorporate doors onto Main Street as well, that would be preferred, understanding that different tenants will have different needs. Same comment about spandrel versus clear glazing to be specified on the plans. Same comment regarding the use of metal panels and accents. Same comment regarding or similar materials. Same comment regarding mechanicals. And we'll just go to the rendering. So this is what it looks like as you're looking west from Drexel. This is the northeast corner of the property, of the building. So this is that metal panel system. This is on the actual, this is on the southeast portion of the building. So this is the parking lot beginning here. This is the drive-in. View from Main Street. Here's that charred wood accent material here. And as you're entering Drexel Town Square, this is the northwest corner of the building. Staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Blair Williams Wired Properties for the property located at 7902 South Main Street, subject to conditions 1 through 9. Mr. Mayor.
What do you know about this building?
Beautiful. Charred wood, it's actually a very cool product. We're using it in Forge and Flare. We have really grown to like that product. The rendering that kind of shows, if you go back to the first of the renderings, just the material palette. So now when you're on Drexel looking down, you can see the patterned metal panel on this building. You can also see the pattern located on the building behind it, which is the Flare building. Again, trying to tie things together. This building solves, we think, for exactly what our intent was on Main Street all along, which was to create a storefront, a series of storefronts down Main Street that would draw people from Main Street to the north if they were already located down there. Obviously, the primary front doors will be to the parking side here. That's how retail works in these environments. We like this building very much, and we think it's a good fit with the rest, and it would be a good way to finish off Main Street.
All right, questions? Commissioner Chandler.
A question about the other material. Do you also have that so we can see the color for the metal? The multicolored metal material?
That's similar to the, okay, got it.
While we're talking about or while you're looking at the proposed materials, I will just say I kind of glossed over the parking. Parking is shared with the PetSmart and Mattress Firm combined building, as I mentioned earlier. For retail spaces, again, 3.5 to 5 parking stalls per 1,000 gross square feet of retail space is specified in the PUD. Based on the size of this building, we would, and the existing retail spaces for PetSmart and Mattress Firm, we would need 96 to 136 parking stalls overall for the two buildings. 208 are shown, and that's actually providing some much-needed extra parking stall capacity for DTS as a whole. So this is anticipated to provide some relief to the parking constraints that we've been beginning to feel, allowing some cross-use of parking for other uses or other retailers, restaurants that are in the area.
The applicant do that on his own, or did you work with staff to accommodate that?
We've worked with everyone.
Good to hear. Alderman Bekavich.
Very quickly with one comment, I agree with Carrie about the doorways to the on the west side off Main Street. You show 2, and I guess that's up to the retailers, and if they have a use, you've already explained the 2 entrance thing with inventory, but it'd probably be nice if you could enter from Main Street as well. I agree with Carrie on that.
We would certainly encourage it, but again.
Right. Be nice to see if you're walking down the street and you don't have to go around the backside.
I believe that it's more likely that the southern retailer would take advantage of that. I think the northern of the two.
Other than that, I think it's just a great way to cap off and front Drexel Avenue with these particular 4 buildings. Very cool.
Mr. Johnson.
Again, back to lighting. Are you planning on using cyclone lights or the GuardCo lights? PetSmart is using GuardCo lights. So there's going to be a transition between that parking lot.
We will work with staff to extend the lighting in that side. There, it makes a lot more sense. We'll look at the scale of it, and we'll work with staff
That work with staff goes a long way, doesn't it?
I hope so.
Questions, comments?
We made our life miserable for an hour and a half so far.
Anybody else? Commissioner Dickman?
I just want to ask, Carrie, okay, looking at the staff recommendations and the changes we made in the previous two buildings, are there any other things you'd like to point out to us now before we, get through them and then find out we're going to keep changing?
I don't think so. I think in this one, it was pretty much all landlord installed. The one exception might be the canopies, the awnings over the individual spaces, but I think for the most part, this one was all straightforward landlord installed. So I don't think that there were any
changes to the
that.
recommendations at all?
This one uses burnished block instead of brick, so we don't have to worry about that 4-inch requirement. So in terms of the specified building materials as listed, it's kind of the same thing that we've been talking about. You can add in to that condition, if you so chose, that similar requirement that we had in the B5, which is minor material changes may be made by staff and substantive changes would require additional plan commission review.
May I ask one question? Corrugated metal, is that just not allowed in the DTSMU PDD?
Not specified at all, I don't
Okay,
think.
perfect.
Or no, actually, it might be specified at,
Non-primary or?
I don't even know if it's accent material, but we do the 3/4 majority just to cover our bases.
Okay.
You good?
I'm good, yeah. I just wanted to make sure we could go ahead with recommendations.
Commissioner Crowell?
It's just a minor question. I'm looking at, we've got access to the building on the parking lot side. That walkway on the front of the buildings, it doesn't really continue the sidewalk. If I'm coming down, help me out here, it'd be on the Drexel Avenue side.
The Main Street connects. You're saying
So,
the
but it
back
could-
side of
yeah,
the building?
Well, the back side is really the entrance side of
Right,
this building
right.
there, so if I'm coming down this walk and Mr.
Any reason why you
Degner's
can't,
not here.
any reason why you can't connect that sidewalk?
Right. It just, to me, it seems like.
Is there an elevation issue there?
Is that
They're talking about.
Oh, is that it?
this Drexel.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with
Walk
that.
on Main Street, you go up a curb.
Okay.
Pretty quickly.
I mean, it explains it. I just thought the way the picture looks, it makes sense.
Because if you remember, Drexel Avenue and Howell starts with a pretty steep thing and slowly declines so that by the time it gets to Main Street, it's almost flat.
Yeah,
Right,
and
Brian?
then we're going down.
Yeah. Okay, that's probably why. I think we're good. So someone make a motion on 4D.
Mr. Dickman will make a motion that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans submitted by Blair Williams, Wire Properties for the property at 7902 South Main Street, known as Building C1, with the following conditions. Number 1, that all building and fire codes are met. Number 2, that detailed plans for signage, including a building sign program, are reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission prior to the submission of permit applications. 3, that the final photometric and lighting plans include the approved luminaire type, pole type, color, and height for the Drexel Town Square are submitted for final approval by the Director of Community Development upon written recommendation of the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits. Number 4, that any proposed spandrel glass panels are clearly identified on revised plans submitted for final approval by the Director of Community Development. No more than 50% of the glazing requirement may be spandrel. Number 5, that, I'll go through this, Jerry.
That the specified building materials as listed on the proposed plans and with the conditions above are approved. Minor material changes may be made by staff. Substantive changes to the specified building materials will require additional plan commission review.
Okay, sounds good to me. We'll go ahead then with number 6, that all mechanical equipment and transformers, ground, building, and rooftop are screened from view. 7, that all revised plans, site, building, landscaping, dumpster details, etc., are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. Number 8, that plans addressing grading, drainage, and stormwater quality, including the use of stormwater best management practices, are approved by the city engineer prior to the issuance of building permits. Number 9, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility.
Guzekowski, second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Havich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Thank you very much, but I do have a request. So if I understand the PDD amendment process correctly, and I may very well not, I believe that what happens is it starts here, there's a 30-day notice for public hearing, and it goes to the council? Is that accurate?
I'll have to check on the exact date, but we'll definitely work with you to kind of fast track it as much as we can.
Yeah, to the extent that motion by this panel is required to trigger that, I suggest you consider making a motion tonight that could be entered into the record as part of that process to the council. Can't?
I don't think
like
that's,
not
I
on
don't
the
think that's
agenda.
something they can do.
Because it's not on the agenda, even if it was an item generated by
It wasn't
the active city.
spelled out in the agenda or in the support materials, was it?
Building back a month.
Maybe more. Do you have
Because
a,
by-
do you
could-
meet,
we could
do you
push
meet
it
in
back
August?
6 weeks, depending on when the council meeting.
Does the council meet in August?
Yes, 2 meetings.
Do we have 30 days before the previous? The only reason I ask is
Yeah.
with the requirement per the motion for the first building was that we couldn't pull a building permit, obviously, until that was done. So this might delay
I
construction
don't think
start.
us doing anything would speed the process up, am I correct?
Well, the only thing is that you would have to review it at the next available plan commission meeting, which we can put it on for the very next one, which
Is it-
is August 9th.
And, the language in there's at least a possible interpretation that the language was intended to include all of the retail north of the alley. And that it was it was omitted by error. I mean, I know I've got folks behind me that would share that particular sentiment, given the history and the process.
So we've already passed 3 things, and now we're going to revisit the
No, I'm just
third
trying to
item?
make sure I understand because I need to leave here and figure out how we move forward. We have to exercise options on the land. We have to close on the land by a date certain. Right now, as of tonight, we have to close on the land without having approvals. So it's a complicated.
We could
it's a
do anything
complicated
right
step.
now. You still have to go through the process, and that could still jeopardize approval or green
Oh,
light it.
no, I understand. My question really was whether we decided it actually requires amendment.
Yes, the condition of approval said that it would have to go through the amendment process. They can't make a motion to recommend an approval for something that was not on the agenda. So in other words, we can't have the plan commission make a recommendation for an amendment to the PUD tonight.
No, I'm asking whether whether the PDD actually needs to be amended.
Yes, it does.
All right, so talk with you, Carrie, about
Yep.
how we get this going?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, folks.
Blair. All right, moving on to a sign plan review. It's item 4E. It's submitted by Scott Lurie, Zaman 3 LLC for the Pizza Man commercial tenant portion of the building at 7878 South Main Street, tax key number 813-9050. Thank you, sir.
This is a request for signage for the restaurant space for the Pizza Man in the existing multi-tenant building that is on Main Street and Drexeltown Square. There was a last-minute change to the plans that were submitted in your reports. So this is now on your screen, the latest rendition. You will notice that there were some staff comments that were taken into consideration with this revision. One being the number of signs, the number of blade signs, and the location of the blade sign on the south elevation were amended. The middle blade sign that was proposed on the west elevation was removed per staff recommendation. The overall sign is a little bit interesting. The reason that that there's a comment in the staff report regarding the size of the sign is because with the wine bar portion of the sign off center, it does change the overall height of the sign. And as we mentioned with previous signs for the Main Street mixed-use buildings, the they are limited to 15% of the wall height. That visually happens at the material change on the exterior of the building. So with the previous two sign packages that had been brought to the Plan Commission, we are recommending that signs not be any taller than 25.2 inches, which would mean shrinking that wine bar portion down a little bit. These comments have also been provided to the applicant's representative. What's proposed is an internally illuminated, actually they're halo channel letter signs on the wall for the south and the west elevation. Then the other signs that are proposed is this blade sign. This blade sign is actually too large according to the PUD, so my understanding is that the applicant is actually going to be going forward with a sign appeal that'll come back at a later date. So I'm going to skip over that one. And then finally, these are the proposed blade signs. Now, there's one on the west proposed, and then there's one on the south proposed. What we have here is an interesting situation in which there has been one identified entrance for this building, and that's on the south, but the door is facing west. So the blade sign is allowed on the south elevation per the PUD because you're allowed 1 to 2 per entry facade, but there's a door that's unspecified on the west elevation. So it may be that the west elevation can also have a blade sign, but that's a question about whether or not that's an entry elevation. So that's something that should be clearly identified tonight. And then finally, there are these exterior lamps that are proposed on the blade signs. Staff is recommending that they not actually be included. We feel that they kind of provide a block for the blade sign itself. If you look how they're mounted, if there's another way that we can illuminate that, that would be preferable. Plus, there's quite a bit of substantial lighting in the area, so these external lights staff feels are not necessary. The wine part, one other thing about the wall sign, the wine bar portion is, it's part of their logo. However, we do have something that says that we don't allow box signs. So it's up to the Plan Commission as to whether or not that portion of the wall sign is going to be acceptable. The staff recommendation, therefore, is that the Plan Commission approves the sign plan submitted by Scott Lurie of Zaman 3 LLC for the Pizza Man commercial tenant portion of the property at 7978 South Main Street, subject to conditions 1 through 7. Mr. Mayor.
I think I've got most of this. There's a slight size issue on the wine bar box sign. We're not sure if box signs fit the PUD or signs in the PUD. We're not sure about the, what was the other one? Oh, the two lights illuminating. Is there something that says we can't do that, or that an applicant can have those? Other than staff opinion, they don't like it. Is there something that backs that up?
I believe that the intent of the blade sign is for them to be non-illuminated. I think the PUD allows for them to be illuminated, but the external lamps are what the issue is, because again, it's a visual block of the sign rather than just having the element. It's for people, it's for pedestrians essentially, but it's also for vehicles as somebody who's traveling on either west on West Town Square Way, or they're traveling north or south on Main Street. So with those lamps, the way that they are, they do have the ability to kind of basically hinder what the blade sign is trying to do, which is draw your attention to a specific retailer. You need to be able to clearly identify that retailer.
They have the right to light the sign.
Right, what we're saying is, can you come up with a different way to light the sign, rather than having those external lamps?
Isn't the idea, again, this is just my opinion, isn't the idea of those lamps are supposed to indicate a kind of an old funky looking sign, and that's how they used to light those things up?
Again, but these are secondary signs, and they're not meant to be, they're meant to be kind of a marker to draw your attention. They're not meant to be illuminated per se, I guess, is the way that I would say it. The way that I've seen these signs in other locations is that they've been either internally illuminated or not illuminated at all. There are other signs on the building, on the retail portion of the building itself. So
That's where-
Is there anything in our language that says they can't have those?
No.
Okay. Mr. Seibert.
I have a question. How does this fit into the standard signage that we have throughout Drexel Town Square? Has anybody else looked at this wedge type, or does it really fit the downtown, Drexel downtown?
Which sign are you referring to? There's two kinds of blade signs. There's the one that they're going for the appeal on, which is not going to be part of the discussion tonight. And then there are these smaller blade signs that we're talking about here.
Is that just a general comment?
What-
So you don't
what's
think
your-
it fits
what-
into
I'm trying to
the?
understand your question, Fred.
And, yeah, well, I'm just saying that I'm looking at the rest of the signage that we put in Drexel Town Square, and I've not seen any blade type signage.
Right, there have not been any
Okay.
blade signs proposed to date. This would be the first for the Plan Commission's approval.
And I'm just wondering, are they trying to continue that
No.
type of standard signage, or are we kind of open to just about anything?
My understanding is that we don't, not staff, the landlord does not want to specify a specific blade sign design or whether or not the tenant has to put one up. It would be at the tenant's discretion for design and place, and, well, somewhat placement.
Do we have as a city a standard for blade signs?
The standard is for size, the standard is for number that are allowed, and that's per the PUD. So it's 1 to 2 per entry facade, and they can be no more than 36 by 36.
Mr. Krell.
At the last meeting, we kind of left the blade signs up to the individual tenants, correct? To some extent,
To some extent.
or to come forward with the blade signs, I guess.
Yes, that's correct, to present them, because I think that for specifically Bel Air and Cantina, they had originally had some blade signs in mind, but they were still unsure as to where they wanted to request them to
We
be.
held off on,
So they actually held off on proposing them, yes.
I guess the comment on these, I think the sign package is unique and kind of fits the concept. And I would agree with staff on this blade signs, and with the amount of illumination on where they're at, I don't know if the lights are really needed. I do think it takes away from some of the, I like what the signs look like. So and just picturing it here, I don't know that the lights are even something that you're going to need. I think that was part of staff's comments, the amount of illumination on the street. So I like the signs. Don't know if we need the spots.
Alderman Bekavich.
Okay, I'm gonna go with the blade signs first as long as we're on it. First of all, I think they're a perfect fit for a complex called Forge and Flare. They're made of reclaimed wood, they're welded, they give you that gritty industrial look, and I think the lights fit perfectly on there. Not only that, it carries through, if you really want to look at the entire Drexel Town Square project, it really carries through to what they created up at Water Street also. So I think this is a very unique fit. This is high quality stuff. It ain't like we're putting up a, what do they call them, a feather flag thing, or what, you hate them things, Pete. What do you call them? Whatever. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as the wattage ain't, if it's a subdued light on there, I mean, we're not talking about a 70 watt halogen sitting on this thing. If it's just a dull light and it gives it that gritty urban feel that we're looking for with the sign on the corner, I really like the design. I agree with Pat. I think the wine bar sign, the Pizza Man sign is unique. This is something, this isn't an everyday franchise. There's only 2 of them, maybe 3. This will be the third. So, I mean, for me, I think it's really different. It ain't some plastic illuminated thing like you see at Burger King, Sonic, or wherever. So I'm happy with it. I really am. I know everybody has a difference of opinion when it comes to signage. But again, I think it's something unique, and I think it's something we should put out there. That's it.
I will just interject one thing. The signs that are similar on the Water Street Brewery building are not illuminated themselves.
No, I was talking more about the interior look of, you know,
Right.
we're taking an old factory space and recreating it. It's almost like, well, we had some leftover factory
If
parts. so.
staff agrees with you, except the feeling is that the blade signs are supposed to be secondary to the overall wall sign, secondary to the proposed large blade sign. So the external lamps take away from that secondary nature of the sign itself. And yes, there is an allowance in the PUD for those signs to be illuminated. I just think that the extra lamps, being as large as they are, positioned as they are, is actually going to be more of a detriment to the use of the signs. Not the use of the signs, but the effectiveness of those signs.
Go ahead.
Ryan Pliska, 756 North Milwaukee Street. I mean, the intent of those blade signs was kind of a pedestrian feel, and the lighting would be just a slight accent. So it's, you know, the materials match what we're doing at Forge and Flare. Also, the materials match what the interior of Pizza Man is. I mean, if you've been to the other two, we use a lot of reclaimed wood, black and steel. So we're not looking for these to be glowing primary signs. We're really looking at just a wash to say when you're walking along the street, there they are.
I'm Bob Hacker from Bauer Sign.
Go ahead.
2500 South 170th in New Berlin. To address the visual side of that too, Carrie, those lamps could be raised slightly on the sign, so you wouldn't get any kind of a visual hindrance, if you will, to the face of it. And they could be smaller too. They do make different size lampshades for that sign.
Go ahead, Pat.
You know, this is sort of a, you know, someone likes it, someone doesn't, and I understand. Sure. Matt Rinka, 756 North Milwaukee Street. You know, I think what we're trying to do, obviously you're looking at an elevation, but you're always going to be looking up at these signs. So I think it's a little deceiving in terms of where the lamp placement is. I think it's perfect, but again, that's my personal opinion. We've done 2 other Pizza Mans, and this is really a very quality restaurateur. Very high quality. Everything that they do is something that is really setting a new bar for this franchise. And so it's not going to be chintzy. Everything. If you want to see some of the signs already, such as the face sign, it's done in 2 other locations. Really nice signage quality.
Let me address one more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Blair Williams, Wired Properties, 2022 East North Avenue. I just want to make 2 quick points about blade signs. One, primary on the buildings, right, our large blade signs lit. There's actually some benefit to having these blade signs lit. If you imagine leaving Main Street at night and you've walked down Main Street and you go to one of the 2 corners where you can come, as you're going, you can read the signs on all of the retailers across the street. But on the side of the street that you're on, the only signs that you're able to see are blade signs. When these are illuminated and create a sense of environment down Main Street, you'll know instantaneously, if they're lit appropriately, which are open, which are closed, and what the retailers are. So I do think that if you think about this environment at night, there is pedestrian value in understanding what's happening on your side of the street the same way you do the other.
And just to add, there is a entrance next to the blade sign on Main Street, and this entrance is for pickup for pizzas. So, you know, hopefully that satisfies the requirement.
Just, I don't have a problem with these blade signs at all, or the lighting that's attached to them. Going back to the issue with the 26 inches versus 25.2. Is that correct? It was 0.8 variance, and
Yeah, and I believe that there was an email, Brian, that you sent about changing that a little bit.
okay, so the applicant's just going to fix that.
I can address that real quickly. We just tipped the sign slightly.
Okay,
That takes care of the height.
seemed like that could have been worked out ahead of time. So thank you for that.
And by the way, that is not a box sign. That's a channel letter lit both front and back. It's built just like the other letters are.
Yeah. I agree with whoever said it. I think the signage for this place is spectacular, and I think it draws attention to what is an outstanding business. And I think to think that we're going to legislate or make every sign kind of fit the same pattern is not what I've ever expected out of Drexel Town Square. I want unique things. We want unique signage because that's kind of the idea. This, in my mind, this fits that. Other questions? Commissioner Chandler.
Quick question about that same sign. Where are these signs located?
These blade signs, the smaller ones?
Yes.
They're proposing one on the west.
That your revised?
Yes, this is the revised. So
Okay.
there's one on the west, which is just on the northern part of the tenant space, and then one on the south, which was moved kind of in the middle of the tenant space per staff recommendation. And Mr. Mayor, to your point, I agree, we shouldn't be making everything look exactly the same. These were the images that were in the PUD for the flag sign examples, blade sign, however you want to specify them. So the intent, I think, was to have them moderately lit, but I think it was the lamp fixture that was giving staff pause, and how that would work with the pedestrian realm, how that would work with the existing lighting in the area, and how that would work on the building itself. No, staff doesn't have a problem with it being illuminated. We were just questioning whether or not it could be illuminated in a different way that might be more effective.
Yeah, and the applicants indicated that if we're requesting, they can certainly make adaptations to it. I just worry that we get too far over our skis when it's allowed, that we're going to try to tweak a design element of how a restaurant advertises their business, essentially. That's my fear. And the applicants already told us that's kind of meets their decor in the interior. So I get why they're doing it outside, because it kind of meets the same. And frankly, I want things like that look, a little askew, or, just because it does draw your eye to somebody that's walking down Main Street or wherever in Drexel Town Square. You want them to notice what's the point of a sign. So I agree I know what you're saying. I have no heartburn on this at all. Mr. Johnston.
What is the height of that blade sign? Is that 7 feet to the bottom of the sign? There's nothing listed for.
It would conform with the PUD requirements.
Do you have any requirements on that, Carrie?
What's your concern? The people are hitting their heads on it? Or?
Yeah, walking
No,
by.
it would be, if you look at the elevation, they're positioned high enough. Those are 10-foot garage doors. So we'd be up 7.5, 8 feet.
Everybody except Manute Bowl would be okay.
Everybody walking by and slapping the sign as they go down the sidewalk.
We don't want that.
Yeah.
Especially-
Well, even at 7 feet, everybody walk down there and slap that sign.
We'd raise them to conform.
Especially if they've been at the wine bar.
Any other questions? Or Commissioner Dickman?
Just a comment. Well, first of all, I agree with the comments. As far as the sign plan is, all the concerns that have been addressed here and brought up, I think it's a very good proposal. But I did want to ask Carrie, it said that the secretary says, while the flag sign on the south elevation allows, staff recommends moving the sign further east on the tenant facade to reduce signage clustering on the southwest corner to provide a visual clue to visitors traveling west on Town Square Way.
Right, that was in regard to the plan that was included in your report. The plan that is on the screen is the latest, so that's already been addressed.
Okay, it's already taken care
Yep.
of. Okay, good.
Carry the conditions all changed, then? For staff recommendation from what we have in our packet, correct? For your saying.
Number one would be stricken, condition number one would be stricken.
Any other questions? Otherwise, a motion.
Bukavich will make a motion that the Plan Commission approve the sign plan submitted by Scott Laurie Zaman 3 LLC for the Pizza Man commercial tenant portion of the property at 7978 South Main Street with the following conditions. 1, that all wall signs, including logos, be reduced in height to a maximum of 25.2 inches. 2, that the location of the wall sign on the south elevation is approved.
Dan, I think you can strike number 3 and
Strike 2.
you can strike 4. And it's up to you on 5.
Okay. Okay, I did one. So then I did two. Two became one.
Dan, why don't you just start over?
Yeah, okay. Okay, which will make a motion that the Plan Commission approve the sign plan submitted by Scott Laurie, Zaman 3 LLC for Pizza Man commercial tenant portion of the property at 7978 South Main Street with the following conditions. One, that all wall signs, including logo, be reduced to a height of a maximum of 25.2. Two, that all blade signs are not revised, are allowed to have external lamps.
You don't even need to say that then, just
Eliminate
strike
Jeez,
it.
man,
Or just
this is
strike it.
terrible. Okay. Two, that all revised plans be submitted for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of sign permit applications. And three, that a permit application for the sign is submitted to the inspection department. I think I got it all.
Dickman seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
David, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Zakowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Guys.
Rolling along.
All right, 4F is a conditional use permit amendment request submitted by Aaron Fisher, Laser Tag Pro, for a conditional use permit amendment to allow indoor commercial recreation of the properties at 9,000 and 9100 South Nicholson Road. Tax key numbers 862-9991 and 872-9994-08.
All right, I'll take this one. I'll change it up a little bit after hearing Carrie all evening.
I knew you were here for
As the mayor stated, the applicant is requesting an amendment to the existing conditional use permit to allow for an indoor recreation facility to operate at 9,000 and 9100 South Nicholson Road. If you recall, there was a conditional use permit that was in existence for Green Man Landscape, and short story is that business no longer exists. However, with the conditional use as written, right now a landscape contractor is allowed out there with outdoor storage for specific landscape materials, as well as the outdoor seasonal storage up to 50 recreational vehicles, trailers, and boats. So the applicant here today is to revise the conditional use permit to allow for an indoor recreational area. Specifically, the applicant is looking to operate an indoor laser tag arena and family entertainment center. Because right now the M1 district does allow indoor recreation as a conditional use in the M1 district, and that's why we're here tonight to discuss that. This business does consist of two components. One is of the laser tag manufacturing and development. They will be operating Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. within the northernmost building located at 9,000 Nicholson Road. Here they'll be inventing various devices, designing software, testing, assembling laser tag products, and also be using that facility to warehouse their product. Right now, the manufacturing division employs 6 full-time staff. They do anticipate additional hires with the growth of the business. Their headquarters will actually be located in the building, the southernmost building at 9100 South Nicholson Road, and also have a component for the Family Entertainment Center, which I'll be talking about next. The second component is the Family Entertainment Center. This will be talking about the laser tag play, private parties, and an arcade. These will operate in the middle building between, is located on the location map, the rectangular building there. They'll be used for the indoor tag arena, and also they'll be using the southernmost building. Half of it is their headquarters, I mentioned before. The other half will be used for private birthday parties or other type of social events. One of the things that they do plan for this is to expand into an outdoor laser tag facility as well. That's considered part of a second development phase that we'll be discussing the possibility of outdoor recreational facilities in the M1 district. The existing parking lot does meet the minimum requirements for this type of business. Included in your report was a description of what their business model is and what kind of traffic they expect to have. They do expect to have 1 to 2 truck deliveries per day. The way this business operates is they have scheduled events, and they anticipate between 5 to 12 vehicles per session. They did not specify how many sessions in a day that they do have, or what they plan on. I suppose it depends on the success of the business. They do have a facility in Greenfield, and the applicant can describe a little bit about that after my summary. So in your report is the conditions and restrictions amended. They're highlighted in yellow, and just going to point out some of the key ones. That very much on page 1, the very top, conditional use would now, instead of saying landscape contractor with outdoor storage, would be stricken and just say indoor recreation facility. On page 4, section 7, building and parking setbacks, the front and street setback for off-street parking was changed from 40 feet to 30 feet to be consistent with our new setback requirements that have been adopted. On page 5, under maintenance and operation, we would strike out section C, talking about outdoor storage materials and what it'd be limited to. And we'd be replaced, I have it here as D, but really it would be C once D is replaced, about the hours of operation. The hours of operation, I think, would be a good thing to discuss here today because due to the location of this site in relation to the residential area, we may want to review this after I go through the rest of the changes. Sections E and F would be stricken. This deals with the boat, RV, trailer outdoor storage. Staff doesn't feel that this is really relevant to the business that they are proposing. The applicant and staff did discuss about striking this, and they did have some reservations, and they may want to present that after my presentation. Under section 10, under permitted uses, we would strike the lumber yard, landscape contractor yard, and we'd replace it with indoor recreation facilities. And then on page 6, under other regulations, there was a sunset date for the outdoor storage for boats and recreation, so that would be removed. If the Plan Commission is comfortable with these changes to the conditional use permit, staff recommends that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council approve the amendments to the conditions and restrictions as part of the conditional use permit, allowing an indoor recreation facility on the properties at 9,000 and 9,100 South Nicholson Road after a public hearing.
Okay, we have a interested applicant who wants to transform the current business into a laser tag facility and some other uses tied to that. Questions or comments on that conversion or related to the item that Pete highlighted, which was the hours of operation? Alderman Bekavich, then Commissioner Chandler.
Interesting use of a facility. It's kind of neat to see something, again, another amenity that's really different. I think the 1 hour of operation that kind of got me was, I think it was Saturday going to 11. Seemed a little late, and being mindful of the residents, maybe that should be towed in a little bit. I myself don't have a problem with the 10 o'clock times and this, maybe the Sunday 9. I don't know if we have to go quite that late on Sunday. So I guess that's a topic of discussion, but interesting. I've never been to one of these places, so it's like, if it fits their need, it's good use of a building that's currently not being used. So it could turn into something, and I'm actually more excited about the manufacturing end of the thing than what technology is, could really grow into something.
Commissioner Chandler?
My question was around that as well. Is the applicant
Yep. Name and address for the record.
Yep, Aaron Fisher, Laser Tag Pro, 4260L South 76th Street, Greenfield.
So these hours of operation, is this only for the summer, year-round?
No, for the indoor facility, our current, just kind of give you an idea, we've had this arena in Greenfield for about 2 years. So we run in sessions, so people come, they book for that session, so it might be an hour experience, there's a little bit of briefing, a little bit of time afterwards. So for times, we were closed at midnight, they gave us on Friday. Actually, we requested 11, they gave us midnight. But a lot of times, we don't ever even run that far. It's more like the game's over, they're sitting in our lobby, hanging out a little bit, maybe buying some snacks, cooling off, and then, talking amongst their friends, and out the door they go. So that was pretty common. We actually didn't run in Greenfield a 10:30 session very, very often. Very few times. Usually, our last session usually was 9 o'clock. So, but occasionally there was an event that would maybe go a little longer, but it wasn't very common.
So with the late night sessions, how would that impact the residents? Something you can see, or people are hanging out outside at certain times?
No, mostly, especially in Wisconsin, because of the weather, most of the activity happens indoors. And especially for laser tag, the slow times for laser tag are usually summer. So this is more of our dead season. So when the weather gets bad, people are looking to get out and do something active, and they do it within our facility. So most of the activity happens within the buildings.
Thank you.
Mr. Seaver?
Yeah, is there any age restriction to this game that you're?
Yeah, you can play.
Right away you pick on it. But I'm just wondering, is there a age limit, you know?
We recommend 6 and up. So if there's, it's laser tag's traditionally been a 7 to 14-year-old market, where tactical laser tag, where it gets more of the adults and teenagers more excited about what we do because we're fresh innovation on this industry. There's only a few of us that do this, that actually manufacture in the whole United States. So we're very different in that we make this stuff, we pour everything into it to make something really cool to bring, you know, modern video games. That's the best way to describe it to life. So really it's for all ages. So it goes from 6 and up. The arcade stuff, like the candy grabs and some of the stuff that we would put in an arcade, obviously are all ages.
Thank you.
Do you have any objection if we went Thursday, Friday, Saturday, close at 10, Sunday 6?
Right now our Sunday time is 8. So real common birthdays are Saturdays and Sundays. So I would prefer to have something like an 8
Up
o'clock.
to 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday.
I like 11.
Well, on the thing that was submitted to us, it says Thursday and Friday, 4 to 10.
Yeah, I know. Probably a little bit of miscommunication between me and Joe on that one. So we were at 11. I'm okay with 10. Okay, so if that's what it needs to be, our session times were 7, 8:30, and 9 o'clock. A session takes about an hour to hour and 15 minutes. So it can go an hour and a half. So that should be fine for
Just
us.
trying to manage
Yeah.
the fact that you're sort of touching a neighborhood, not a neighborhood per se.
Sure,
but
sure, sure.
Residential touches your area.
Yeah, well,
So
okay. Yeah, I mean, for us, 11 makes it a little easier because if the session ends at 10:15 or 10:20, it takes 15 minutes to shoot people. They're going to kind of take their time and work their way out the door after they're done laughing and talking and doing whatever. So that's why we like 11. We're not trying to start an event at 11.
if you could compare this to Greenfield, what's the volume of people that are in there every day?
Well, most of our business right now is really, it's mostly weekends. And then during the week, we have some private party type corporate events. That's really what we want to push for during the week. Those are usually more earlier hours. Actually, this arena right now will be a bit smaller. The proposed use, while we're looking to purchase this properties, we want to do some outdoor activity, which would make it very, very unique because there's nothing like that in this Milwaukee, Waukesha County as far as an outdoor experience. So, but that again is seasonal, and that's going to push more in the summer months.
And how would you separate out the outdoor activity from infringing on the rights of the residents around there? So they're not essentially being spectators to whatever activity you have
Sure.
going outside.
Yeah, so most of the proposed area where we want to do an outdoor battlefield is in the back portion of the property. The closest residents, if you look at the map at those 3 houses, there's actually a good amount of landscape there. There's a building. Most of our outdoor battlefield will take place in that middle section behind those the 2 larger buildings. So it's, just went on the property not too long ago, took a drive through just to look at this again, thinking about these plans. It's pretty far back. There's a good amount of distance from the nearest house. I mean, there's a good amount of space. So parking's away from the residents, and the outdoor battlefield is back. We don't want it on the front. We have our, family entertainment on the front, and this is something we want to create as something they come back to and go, wow, this is awesome, as far as our proposed outdoor use.
Since those of us that have been around for a while know what this was used for previously, how does your business intend to fix up what, frankly, is an eyesore
Sure.
when you drive down Nicholson Road?
Well, that's a good question. So we're family entertainment. We want to be attractive to people. We don't want the place to look like a dump. That's important to us. It's not about us storing a bunch of, You know, from my understanding, what I've heard, there's like a compost heap. You know, that's not something that fits a family entertainment venue. You look to the left, there's a compost heap, you know. So it's entertainment. Think of, we're not the scale of Six Flags or something like that, but when you think of any family entertainment, dumpy and, you know, creating a cool experience doesn't make sense for us. So we really want, you know, as we grow and we mature this business and we mature this outdoor battlefield, we really want to make something different and unique that, you know, something you would find in the Dells or something you might find, you know, as far as theming. It's got to look good. You know, we're trying to add to the overall experience, and the theme's important for us. So
At this point, you're just looking for the conditional use to change. You have no idea what you might do to the building.
yeah, no, I mean, as far as that, we want to do some initial landscaping to the front by the parking lot, some signage, obviously, for the front of the building. There's not really a lot that we need to change as far as the outdoor landscape in the back. The concrete kind of works for us because if we would build a battlefield back there, it's dry, you know, it's not wet, it's not muddy. So for us, it works well for us. Plus, I don't know if this is covered in there or not, but We Energy is currently renting there now. They'd like to continue to rent. We don't need all this space right out of the gate. We obviously got to mature and grow as our business grows. We've been around for about 3 years, doing the arena for 2 years. So as we need more space and want to build out that battlefield towards the back, we could, you know, fill more space and, you know. So we have an opportunity to rent to them. They still want to rent. It seems like it hasn't been a problem for the current residents. I did call the alderman to try to get some feedback to see if they wanted to do like a meeting or something like that. So we've been trying to take some proactive steps to, you know, we kind of heard some of the complaints. You know, we don't want to be held responsible for somebody else's wrongdoings, but at the same time, we understand there's residents there. So.
Got it. Commissioner Krill.
I guess difficult property like some of the other ones we've looked at. I think a unique use. I think it's encouraging to have some stuff, some activity like that in here somewhere, if this area works. Hours, you know, if we go at 10 o'clock, just like restaurants that we let open till 10, the guests aren't all gone at 10 o'clock. You're still operating and functioning. So I think anything later than 10 would be unnecessary. So I think in the residents, keeping it till 10 o'clock. I think Sundays maybe should give them a little latitude. I think that is kind of a family day. I think 6 might be too early, Mayor. So
we go to 8.
You know, maybe 8 o'clock on Sundays and 10 on Friday and Saturdays, with the understanding not everyone's going to be out of the building right at 10 o'clock. That's not how it works. So that would be my
Anything else? I got two. Mr. Grundy.
Battlefields, you know, that's.
Name and address first.
Oh, okay.
Even though I know who you are.
Yeah, Ron Grundy, 9160 Nicholson Road. I'm the closest residence to what they're talking about with the battlefield. And personally, you know, I'm a sportsman. I have nothing against, you know, hunting and things like that. But this battlefield thing, it's simulated with the laser tag. It's simulated, you know, with a person shooting at one another. The same thing with the battlefield that he's talking about with the paintballs. I don't know if they use paintballs or lasers or how they do that, but I don't think it has a place in our residential, close residential area. People that come down there, the people that use those types of facilities, kind of want to be Army guys or whatever they are. If they're that interested, I think they should join the Army. Maybe they'd have an opportunity to get shot at or shoot at someone else. But I don't think it has a place in our area. We had enough with the Green Man, and I didn't think it could get any worse. But I think with this type of facility, we might see some problems with the types of people down there and the hours of operation. And I just got back from Alaska. I just heard about this the other day. And, you know, I haven't seen anything in writing, what they're going to do, the proposals, how they got it laid out, all of the stuff that's supposed to happen. And I know what happens once they get in there, there's all kinds of things that'll go on. So I personally, and I haven't had a real chance to talk to a lot of the neighbors, but there's some opposition there. So I thank you.
Thank you. Mark Verhalen.
Mark Verhalen, 1200 East Ryan Road. And Other than being a resident and a property owner in fairly close proximity to this, I am the alderman as well. I did talk to the gentleman on about this project on the telephone, and I passed on information that they gave me to a number of the residents up and down the street, asked if they'd want to get together and talk to the gentlemen themselves, and they pretty much, most of them said, well, no, you pretty much filled us in, and you know, when it comes to plan commission, you can represent the bulk of the people in the neighborhood. Now, Mr. Grundy touched on one issue, but I talked to the fellows here that want to do this, and one of the main things that I told them was, first of all, on Nicholson Road, we as residents on Nicholson Road were forced to put up with Bestway Bus for a long time, and it was, you know, just a terrible amount of traffic. And Nicholson Road is a rural cross-section street. There's no sidewalks, and the neighborhood is transitioning right now. There's a lot of younger people that are buying the houses. There's a lot of young children on the road. So that was one of the things I addressed to the potential buyers of the property, that, you know, there might be a traffic concern as they stated they're bringing in, you know, groups of people and whatnot. So that was one thing, and most of the people that are on the street further to the south, that was their main concern, was the traffic. As you go to the north, where the properties are adjacent here, that's where you run into some of the other concerns. And as I stated, it's kind of a rural cross-section street. To the north of the proposed property here is all Milwaukee County parkland. Most of the property to the south is pretty much can't be anything else developed on it because most of the homes front on Nicholson Road. I have a substantial piece of property across the street that's zoned residential, so there's a potential it's going to be basically all residential around there. And one thing that Mr. Grundy just stated was kind of the outdoor use, the battlefield type things, and I would ask, you know, maybe Commissioner Correll or some of the other people that live in quieter neighborhoods, you know, do you want people running around in, you know, close proximity to your backyards every Saturday, every Sunday till 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, you know, playing games or whatever the case may be? Because, you know, even if there's a limited amount of people there, there's always, you know, potential for people yelling and carrying on while they're going through the motions of going through the battlefield scenario. So that's why I think the people that are adjacent to this have concerns as to what could go on right in back of their homes. Now, I did mention to the applicants that maybe if they'd want to try something of the outdoor nature, maybe they could restrict it to the northern property and keep the southern property where it's adjacent to the houses pretty much vacant, or if they had to use it for maybe parking or something like that would be all right. But I don't feel it's fair to the neighbors here to ask them to put up with people running around in their backyards till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, you know, every Saturday, every Sunday, year around till, you know, all hours of the day or night. I don't think that's really fair to the neighborhood. So,
Mayor, not to interrupt, but we're only talking about indoor at this point. We're not too outdoor at all markets. So
well, the next thing's gonna allow it if it's there.
But that's
Wrap it up.
correct.
Yeah, we're talking about indoor, so wrap up your comments.
All right. I don't think the manufacturing part of it, there's a question. As far as the indoor part of it, you know, hours of operation as well. Looking forward to the next item on the agenda. If there's any consideration for outdoor, I would hope that would not be considered at all, because it really doesn't fit in residential areas. There's other venues that do this. One in particular is up by the airport. Good place for it because it's surrounded by, you know, other restaurants, theater, and those businesses all close at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. So it's better off in a business type setting where you're not disturbing residential neighborhoods. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Correll.
Comment. I mean, first off, comments are made. I'm looking as an indoor. Outdoor is a completely separate subject when it comes up, Mark. So my comments are looking at strictly as indoor at this point. And I guess my question would be the applicant, understanding that, you know, we got to get through both of these before we consider outdoor. So I don't know how financially makes sense one versus the other. So at this point, it's strictly indoor.
Other comments? You know, I hear what both of you guys are saying, but this smacks of a little bit of the person saying, I'll agree to something as long as I agree with it, and everything else, not interested. We have a property here that can be developed for a business that is frankly family friendly, with an applicant that's willing to invest in the city, move their business to the city. It's hard to find fault with that. So we're always sensitive to residences and how it impacts neighborhoods. But to say that this is going to impact the backyards of a significant number of residents is pretty far-fetched. I know that most of the people that live in that area, and especially if you're talking about the northern parcel, and specifically the indoor part, not going to interfere at all. Nicholson is a rural road, yes, but it's also is designed to handle traffic, and this is not a huge traffic producer. I think this is a good use of an existing building. It's an interesting use that we don't have, and I think it makes sense. Any other questions or comments? Brian Johnston.
Question for the applicant, was there any reason to leave the all boat RV trailer storage in there, or is it okay to strike that all out?
Besides having a boat myself, I might store there. No, partly for some of the and this is something we discussed, and I had a discussion with Pete, and just trying to understand this. You know, some of the stuff we want to do that might fit a theme of an outdoor might involve some of these kind of vehicles. That was one thought we had. So if it struck out, does that mean if we want to buy a bus and there's one of the missions is you infiltrate the bus and recover something, and, you know, or some kind of experience we make outdoors? That was some of the thoughts I had. Also, I mean, it's just a lot of property, you know, and we're a young business that we don't have big time investors. We've invested this ourselves, and we want to keep the property available. There's a lot of space. We're not going to use all the space. Right out of the gate, if there's an opportunity to rent some storage, if somebody wants to park a couple boats there in the back corner, that's not affecting anybody. I didn't see any need to strike it out. It's frankly not our sole use and what we're looking at trying to do, but I suppose as any business, you don't hope not to limit the opportunity that might become available to you. So there may be people that would want to rent and it would not affect the neighborhood, and I don't see why to strike it out and lose out an opportunity to rent off maybe a third of our property for a time until we're ready to grow and expand. I don't want to lose that opportunity. That was my thought, okay? But again, that's not our main focus for our business. But, you know, when you're buying a property, that was approved use. I'd like it to stay, but I'm willing to, you know, we want to be in good terms with the city, good terms with the neighbors, all that kind of stuff, so.
Just along with that, part of the original approval for that was a lot of extra landscaping that never has come to be installed. So if that is something that you would be looking at, that could change the amount of landscaping in your site plan designs
Sure.
to keep that in there.
Okay.
I don't know if that's something we want to leave in there or strike out. How they want to move forward.
You folks have to realize there's no municipal sewer to that property. And I think if you're going to have multiple, you know, a lot of people in there, that should be hooked up with sewer. And it's at this present time, I know that it's not. So that's a question that I have. And I really, you know, believe, you know, the shooting and battlefield stuff doesn't belong here.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about tonight.
As far as the sewer, and I could be, Brian was in that conversation. We had a pre-meeting with Carrie and Brian, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he didn't foresee the sewer being an issue. So I don't know if maybe you want to comment on that. You were in that meeting.
Just not knowing what their loads are. You don't have somebody that's there all day long, constant use of a sewer. You know, they still have to evaluate their system. They still have to make sure that it's sized appropriately for their uses, but it should be adequate for what's there.
Well, that's,
It survived Green
it's a
Man.
normal part of
Yeah.
retroing a building. They're gonna have to meet the requirements, so, as long as you're aware of it.
Yep.
You have something to add?
The only thing I have to add is, this is an opportunity. We have a conditional use for an indoor recreation facility. The uses that we had out there was always a concern about outdoor storage of materials and equipment. That's why there was a sunset date. So on page 6 of the conditional use permit, conditions and restrictions, the section that's stricken out was that it was supposed to expire in 10 years. This was approved in '07. So really, the sunset was going to be over. There, at the time the commission approved this conditional use permit, it was only going to be allowed for a 10-year period. The idea was that whole outdoor storage was going to go away because the business was supposed to, we gave them a 10-year window to make things happen, and then after that, that was going to be no longer a secondary opportunity for the business. So if the commission decides to keep that in, then they're going to have to make also a change to section 12, because otherwise it's going to expire, it won't expire because it'll be reapproved in another 10 years, but do we want to do a 10-year sunset? From a code enforcement perspective, I'm not a big fan of sunsets. History, I think, I could go back and show how often we keep making extensions, and it's kind of we just don't want to say no, so we just say, well, we'll visit it in 10 years, we'll kick it down the road a little bit. I have some reservations on that. To me, it's an opportunity to eliminate an outdoor storage facility at this time. If they want to run an indoor facility, well, then we're gonna take away the outdoor storage component. As some of the residents made the comment, it's a residential neighborhood. Would we really want to continue that type of use if there's going to even be more residential to the south?
That argument makes a lot more sense because, if I'm gonna look at this as a business that's gonna enhance what's there now, extending the outdoor storage of whatever is not a good use in the minds of the neighbors or in my mind. If you're gonna do this, focus on what you want to do as your main business, which is the indoor facility. At some point in the future, yes, you may revisit it for an outdoor battlefield or whatever you want to call it. I would suggest you don't call it a battlefield, but whatever, because there are people sensitive to that.
Sure.
But you have an opportunity here to enhance the property, bring us something we don't have currently. That should be your focus.
Sure.
That's just me talking.
Yeah, sure. And to address some of that too, I didn't know what would be considered, but like We Energies, like going through that property when we were looking at it and finding out they're still interested in renting it for a time and thinking, well, that's great, that'll help for a little bit. They have poles and stuff stored out there and things like that. Is it going to eliminate our use to, and maybe you can answer.
Respond to that.
Currently, the way we have it set up with that tenant is a temporary use permit. So they were given, I believe, 12 months, 11 months to stay there. They wanted an extension. And then they went for an extension, basically asked for a new temporary use permit, and this commission has been granting that use on a very limited term basis. So if this applicant were to purchase the property and want to continue that relationship, we would have to come back always before a plan commission saying, all right, we'd like to, extend this use, outdoor storage, and you would have the site plan that specifically shows this is where they're going to put the poles. They're going to have 4 trucks. They operate, you give that whole business thing. It has gone smoothly so far to date. I believe this is 2 years now. I think the alderman could probably attest to it. I don't believe hasn't been any complaints regarding that operation. So even eliminating this from the conditional use permit wouldn't necessarily prevent you from continuing that relationship with that tenant. Just that you would have to come back on a yearly basis, apply for that temporary use permit to be able to go forward. And so that provides the city the opportunity, if there is a problem with that tenant, hours of operation, we can be addressed, we can keep going with that instead of if we put it in a conditional use permit, we have the same issues we had with previous operations there where it just kind of goes into maybe something else.
Commissioner Dickman.
We've been talking about the facility as far as, bringing in people. I'm more concerned as far as a manufacturing facility. It sounds like they develop a lot of new items.
Yep.
And you sell them to other places?
Yeah. So we've We've sold to 25 plus countries. We have over 200 clientele. We actually, a factory overseas does all our main manufacturing. But one of the things we talked about is bringing assembly over here, where we have components shipped to us from our factory. A lot of what we're building, I mean, they're swords, they're guns, they're shields, and smaller electronics. Okay, so some of it's like testing. Like one of the things we did this last year was got FDA certified approval. So one thing to maybe address the gentleman's concern, it is lasers, but they're certified with the FDA as a class 1 laser, so they're very safe. They don't emit any visible light. The only visible light that comes out of our equipment is a color to represent some kind of flash of what team's shooting at you. But other than that, they're completely safe. So a lot of what we're manufacturing is software. We have an app, we have computer software we developed, and we have smaller electronics. It's not big machinery. We're not producing molds or anything like that, but I mean, obviously this property provides us a place if we would continue to grow. We have a retail gun actually that we've been working on for the last 2 years that we just unveiled at CES, which is a consumer electronics show. And so we see a lot of potential growth. Actually, our manufacturing arm is really our biggest venue, but the arena is a big support to us, because anytime someone wants to buy equipment from us, that they come and they check out what we do. And right now, all we can do with this current property that we're in now is indoor experience. But the outdoor experience is another way for us to expand our arm and show how our equipment works, not just indoor, but outdoor. And that's really what makes us different, because most laser tag equipment for the last 30 years has been strictly indoor. The laser tag equipment we make, we spent a lot of time, over 6 years of R&D, to produce something that works really well for outdoor. And we're actually making a really high-end, think of the iPhone or Galaxy S phone for consumers. That's the high-end phone. Our retail product is like a high-end consumer retail product that they can buy at Toys R Us and they can play in every one of these residential backyards already. You know, so we're just taking that and giving a place for people to play as well.
I could see using the outside as, shall we say, a demonstration area when you've developed something, so that you can sell more, but not so much. I hate the word battlefield too. It's got to be used. You got to use something different.
Yeah.
Than that. But I could use it as a demonstration area, and I'd like to see your manufacturing operation really take off. I'm more excited about that than the rest of the facility.
Anybody else? Let's get a motion on 4F.
Okay, which will make a motion that the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council approve the amendments to the conditions and restrictions as part of the conditional use permit allowing an indoor recreational facility on the properties at 9,000 and 9100 South Nicholson Road after a public hearing.
Seifert seconds.
Can I hold on a second? Could I just confirm the hours of operation section?
Yes, please.
So section 8, maintenance and operation, it'll be sub C, stating that Saturday would be from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. and then Sundays from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
8 p.m.
Is that what the commission agreed on? And if so, I just want to make that.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. And I think the applicant was agreeable to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that. Like I said, a gentleman stated about, a session might end at 10, but it might take 15 minutes for someone to get out the door. I mean, as long as that's okay,
Yeah,
I'm
and
fine with that.
We're not going to
The
bust
same for any
anybody's-
business. It takes a while for people to shuffle on our way.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so moved as Pete stated the hours of operation.
We have a second?
Agreed.
For seconds? Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Come on.
Real quick, during the week, so we do private events during the week. What is our time frame that we're able to do that?
Stay it as listed, right?
Thursday and Friday, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Saturday would be 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
So there's nothing we can do Monday through Thursday?
Why would we not allow
That was what the applicant, I took from their,
Did you write something?
from their proposal. Their manufacturing division was Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And Family entertainment business hours Thursday, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., Friday, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., Saturday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. So that's, what I took was what they supplied as part of their application, so that's why I included that in the business hour.
First of all, name and address, then tell me what you would suggest that the commission.
Yeah, Joe McGeorge, 4260 South 76th Street, Greenfield. So, yeah, we do, that's kind of like our regular business hours. We have regular scheduled sessions, but from time to time, it's actually not that often. We get corporate parties or, scheduled private events that are like during the week. It might be during our regular business hours. It's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday from 2 to 4, and 20 people from Chick-fil-A come over, and they have a private event. It's good for us. Sometimes we do some cross promotion things with it. We give them a party. It kind of helps us build the business.
What time do you start your manufacturing hours?
It's 8 to 6.
Oh, it's Sunday hours, 11 up till 8.
I was going to request 9.
So 8 to 9, is that what you're asking? Any thoughts on the commission?
Not for regularly scheduled sessions, but for the private events.
How are you going to handle that?
Is that Monday
Monday different than
through
Sunday, Mayor.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
8 to 9, and then the other times apply?
Yeah, and it's we might have at this point the way our business works now, we might do one of those once a week or once every other week.
I get it. We're just trying to set the hours of operation. So,
Right, we want to get the scheduled sessions where you'd be having traffic at the most,
Pete, the manufacturing will be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday.
And then the Family Entertainment Center, they indicated that Thursdays and Fridays would be from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then Saturday, the commission said agreed to 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then Sunday would be 11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
we know what that says, but they're indicating they have parties during the week where they want to use.
So Monday through Wednesday, you guys need an open window to have special events occasionally.
Why didn't you make Monday, Wednesday the same as Thursday?
Yeah.
Monday through
10 to
Thursday
10.
should be consistent.
All right.
Let's do that, yeah.
So amend the hours of operation on the manufacturing end to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on the manufacturing end, Monday through Friday. Then Monday through Friday would be 10 to 10 for the family entertainment. Saturday would be 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday 11 a.m.
All right, I'm just going to repeat what you said.
Okay.
For clarification,
Please.
Manufacturing Division, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Family Entertainment Center, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Saturday from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then Sunday, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay.
Do the motion?
No, just note, so moved from what Pete Wagner just stated.
Okay, just second up to me, or okay to, what do you call it? Voted on to me.
Okay, so the revised,
Second it?
the revised motion was made by Alderman Bukavich, seconded by Seibert.
Aye.
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 Roll call.
Roll call. This meeting has been a
long one.
Dickman, aye.
Johnson, aye.
David, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Earl, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Final item is zoning text amendment review, proposed to section 17.0317 to allow outdoor commercial recreation as a conditional use in the M1 manufacturing district. Pete?
Yes, I'll take this one as well. This proposal is being brought before you by the same applicant from the earlier agenda, talking about outdoor playfields in the M1 zoning district. Now, right now, we do have the indoor as a conditional use. The question is whether or not an outdoor recreational use is suitable in the M1 district. To go ahead with that, staff is recommending multiple amendments to the code that would take into consideration any outdoor recreational facility. Now, keep in mind, now this is not just located for the 9,000 Nicholson location. This would go citywide. So this could be in North Branch, South Branch, Moncourt, Liberty, Corporate Preserve. I mean, anywhere you can think of, there is the M1 district, outdoor recreational facilities would be permitted. So I just like to keep in mind that, we just got off the topic of laser tag. But there are indoor recreation facilities located in the city. There's a indoor baseball facility on 13th Street. There's the Whiskers Over Tails, in Chasing Tails in the North Branch Park, Industrial Park, which has the indoor playground. There may be outdoor facilities that may not necessarily be a laser tag play field, but it could be a playground. It could be water slides. It could be quite a variety of uses in the M1 district. So to do that, to move forward with the idea of this, we would recommend adding to the definition section, which is 17.1402, identifying what commercial outdoor recreation is. And just for the record, I'll read it out loud, saying a recreational facility conducted for commercial purposes and outside of a building, including uses such as athletic fields, miniature golf, outdoor skateboard park, laser field, tag field, swimming, wading, bathing, and other therapeutic facilities include things such as tennis, handball, basketball courts, batting cages, trampoline facilities. The point that I want to focus on is not including firing ranges. So, because I think that there's been some expressed interest in having a firing range in the city. We did approve an indoor firing range in our M1 district, just that we would not allow for an outdoor firing range in the city by this definition. Also, we would talk about that there should be minimum side and rear setbacks for outdoor commercial recreation. This would be for section 170317F5, saying that any recreation structure or field should not be less than 15 feet, but if abutting a residential district, the side and rear setback should not be less than 30 feet and subject to 170205D, which is the section that requires an additional 20-foot buffer, landscape buffer from the area. So really, if it was abutting a residential district, there'd be a minimum of a 50-foot setback of any type of outdoor facility. It would require also site plan review. And then we talked about, the earlier item about like a bus or a boat or something to be used. That would be part of a site plan review that would identify, that would be reviewed by this commission as to location, how it would be screened from residential properties that abut the property. Also, we'd also limit any sort of recreational structures to not exceed 17 feet in height. And when I mentioned earlier about water slides and, kind of get your Six Flags, this would limit that to a 17-foot height structure. So, that would allow playground, play sets. It could allow, a streetscape, but it wouldn't necessarily allow 2-3-story structures to be placed in the M1 district as an outside amenity. So if the commission is comfortable with these proposed text amendments, the next step would be to recommend to the Common Council to approve these text amendments after a public hearing. So just read my staff recommendation to you is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that Municipal Code Section 17.0317 sub C, 170317 sub F sub 5, and Section 17.1402 be amended as presented to permit outdoor commercial recreational facilities in the M1 manufacturing district as a conditional use after a public hearing.
While I was enthusiastic about the indoor use, I'm not so enthusiastic about a drastic change to the M1 district uses. I don't know that we've researched the impact on all the areas you mentioned in your report, or at least what you read. I feel like this is a quick response to a request from an applicant that we're going to all of a sudden jump. They're just talking about an indoor facility. Now we're going to quick and jump and change the outdoor uses. It seems really too fast.
Well, keep in mind that anytime there's a conditional use, the Plan Commission can always, not approve a conditional use permit for a particular use, citing circumstances. So, I understand the sensitivity to the Nicholson Road predicament, or situation, but to preclude it from other zone, industrial parks, would that necessarily be something to prevent? Now, I'm trying to give the both sides of the situation here. That yes, you're not allowing this as a permitted use, so the commission and the council always will have oversight of is it suitable for a particular location. But I can also see your point, Mayor. We talk about outdoor battlefields, and now let's make it a conditional use to approve it now. So,
I'm not comfortable that I know enough about it based on what I have in front of me.
What are
That's
some
all
of
I'm
the
saying.
No, Jack,
I'll let
what
you-
are some of the communities around us? How do they handle this? And secondly, I agree with the mayor that just the gentleman here that came here before us, they're not going to jump right into this anyways. So why are we in a big rush? I'd like to know more about what other communities do and what we should do. I think it's just.
I think the report needs to be a little more robust.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have enough to act on it, to be honest. That's just me talking. Maybe the rest of the commission feels differently. I just don't have enough information. You have something to say?
Go ahead, Joe.
So, say my name and address again.
Once you say it, you're good.
Okay. So yeah, actually, one of the initial things that drew us to the property, actually the biggest thing was the fact that we wanted to create an indoor and outdoor. When our clients come and visit us, want to buy from us, it gives them a vision about what they can do. And we sell to all sorts of different types of venues, from, indoor entertainment facilities meant for 6-7-year-old all the way to, haunted houses and things like that. So we really kind of sell across the board. Addressing the safety of I keep hearing that, and people worried about the battlefield, and we called it play field in the application and everything, but we've sold this equipment into countries and places that have extremely strict gun laws. Okay, it is safer than a Nerf gun. There's no projectile. You can't get poked in the eye by it. We've sold into like Bermuda, the Cook Islands, places like that have like a 10-year mandatory jail sentence if you have a gun part. So I guess, what we want to do with the property is establish ourselves with the indoor, convert the buildings into our new headquarters, and then move into that outdoor space to try to create an attraction that's really unique. And there's places you can see them, like in Chicago, they have some outdoor places. These are very attractive for communities and well known.
I'm not saying that I'm against any of that, what you just said. I just say I need some more information before I open it up citywide.
Sure,
to the uses that he mentioned and the one specific use you're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
That's all I'm talking about. Doesn't mean we're going to table it for 3 years.
Sure.
I just want to have a more robust report that tells me the impact of this change on those districts, what the potential uses maybe that aren't spelled out here could be that maybe we're not thinking of, because I don't know that any of that's in here. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and originally we came to, we were going to try to apply for the indoor with the outdoor and all of it together. Kerry recommended that this was the proper course of action to take.
You've done nothing wrong. Oh, okay. I just need some time. We need time, at least unless I'm gauging to figure it out. Okay. We're not going to rush on this. Sure. So that's all we're saying.
Yep, and the outdoor and everything, I'm sorry.
We have no opposition with your business model or anything.
Sure.
You've said it all you need to say. I think the big thing right now is this is a big leap right now for us. It's a little premature, so
but
we need more intel. So
it's important they understand. I think I made the point earlier in the first one. This purchase, or if you're looking at it, there's no assumption that the outdoor is going to go through, and that's going to take some time. So I think you need to understand that as you look at your business.
Yeah, and as we wrote in the report, for the staff, that's the outdoor component is really a large part of the phase 2 plan. We have thoughts of putting up a new building out there, also some outdoor structures that would go along with the whole project. So that'll take some time for us too. But if we need to work with staff on that to develop that, then certainly.
I'll provide some direction to staff on what I would like to see in terms of a more fleshing out of this subject.
Okay.
You can certainly come back in a month. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we can revisit it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I kind of agree with the mayor. We need need some more information on this, but I don't disagree with some of the early research Pete did on some of the things he mentioned, things like batting cages and things like that that would really fit in these M1 districts and they could use. So I think Pete's going down the right path. He had the idea of the berms and the 50-foot setbacks. So I think this is something that definitely could work. And really, I just want to say, be mindful of what this is. I'm not familiar with laser tag. I've never even done paintball. But generations all experience different things, do things differently. In my day, we played kick the can. It just ain't a good experience for a kid. Wally, you had a hoop and a stick.
Even worse,
I mean, things are different now, and the experience is going on. We have to change with the times, too, and accommodate some of these things. So it has to be looked upon. And I think Pete's going down the right path, and the mayor's right in holding.
And just think about this. So when I was younger, I played a lot of softball. So if you live by a softball field, they use aluminum bats, and all day and all night and the weekend, you hear the ping of aluminum bats all nonstop, because that's all you do is hit that ball around. So all the neighbors that live around those places have to hear that. That's why most of our athletic baseball fields are in areas where there's not a ton of neighbors around them. So that's the kind of impact that I'm talking about. You don't think about it and think, oh, baseball fields are cool. Yes, they are, but you can really impact people with noise. You have to be sensitive to that.
Say one thing too, the size of this property, it's big. So like that was something we knew would be a complaint. What is it going to be? All this noise and all these problems. So where we want to put the outdoor recreation is a back away from people. Ambient noise drowns out a lot of what comes out of electronics. So it's also something that we have control on. Like I was like, man, we could just go there. Let us put 30 guns back there and blaze away and have someone stand on their back porch and front porch. And we could prove that this isn't something that's going to I think a sports field will actually many times be a lot more of a disruptive thing to a neighborhood. This is a big property and really want to keep it. I mean, there's a railroad on the back side of it. That's where we want to keep the battlefield. So those are the thoughts we had, and stuff like that. So.
And some of our initial planning, the thought is to put the play field on behind the main buildings there, so they are a little bit more northward.
We get it.
And also there's a couple rows of trees. I think there's 2 rows of trees in between the houses and the property's fenced all the way around. So there's a lot we can do there.
We're not saying no. We're just saying we need some more information.
I'll sit down.
Sure. Alderman, you have anything else? Anything?
I'll talk about it when it comes back.
Okay. All right, we'll hold that item and need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, Chandler makes a motion to adjourn at 9:21.
Guzekowski seconds.
I thought I heard Guzekowski second. Roll call.
Dick and I.
Johnston, aye. Bukevich, aye.
He says yes.
Guzekowski, aye.
Clifford, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Have a good night.